Welcome back to the Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is our SEC preview. This is BuckMetrics, joined as always by Robert Martin. Robert, I'm sure you've been dying to know, so I'll give you and everybody that really doesn't care an update. I have air conditioning now, so crisis finally averted.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah, it's really hot. It's even really hot up here too in Canada. Although I'm assuming it'll be a lot more warm there in California. But yeah, it's good to be back. I missed our last episode for the conference, the American preview. I actually missed it. I had merch for it. I had FAU. This is Florida Atlantic. I had merch, but it's all good. You guys did a really good job for that, and yeah, go check that out. But yeah, this is the big one. This is the SEC tonight.
It is, and my dogs, as you can hear, unfortunately, are just so excited about this. There they go, just right on cue. And especially about our guest, Brendan Moore. If you look at Brendan's Twitter profile here, my God, Brendan, what are you doing with us? You're slumming it here. Thank you for joining us for the second year in a row. Jeez. Sorry about that for the SEC preview. I'm going to put myself on mute while my dog's down and just tell us about yourself and plug away, please.
Yeah, first of all, thank you guys for having me on for the second year in a row, so I appreciate that. Yeah, so I mainly cover Michigan State football, kind of Michigan State basketball, a little bit of Michigan State, kind of everything there, but I also do talk a lot about just college football in general on my Twitter page right there at BMoreCFB. Yeah, love SEC, Big Ten, love all college football really, so I talk a lot about that on Twitter there, and then I also helped with the CFB Focus digital preview magazine. So if you want to check that out, go to cfbpod.com. So about a little over a week until the season, so still time to get in on that. That's $12 digital preview, everything you need to know about college football. And yeah, season's right around the corner, so get on that.
Robert, after the pod, we have to talk to Brendan about being more ambitious. This is embarrassing. Dude's half my age, and he's lapped me 3 times already. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us. Sorry, Robert, go ahead.
No, yeah, it's very impressive, and it's a lot of college football content, and we love college football, so it's always great to see more content in the space, and the previews are obviously huge for a lot of people for right before the season.
Yeah, I love doing it. Like, to me, it's technically a job, but to me, I have fun doing it, and it doesn't really feel like a job. So that's my ambitions with it. Yeah, I might seem ambitious, but to me, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like fun, because I'd be doing this in my free time anyway. So to me, it's a perfect scenario.
Exactly. That was the genesis of my model way back when. Also, a lot of spare time with COVID to really, really refine it. And with that, let's get to the overview of revisiting our predictions from last year. Hey, Robert, congratulations. You and I selected the number 1 team to make the conference title game, so big pat on the back to us for that. Us and everybody else in the college football universe. Brendan nailed it. He had the title game, Bama and Georgia. We all whiffed on our upsets. We all went against Bama, and even though they were a little shaky last season until towards the end, sorry about that, we all somehow managed to miss the upsets. Let's do better this year, if we can.
It's funny because talking about Bama, right? We all pegged them as shaky, and they were shaky, but it was just an incredible turnaround in the season. Again, this was a team that was losing to USF, right? They were losing a game to USF, and I believe the reason they were losing the game was because Nick Saban was, I think, punishing his team or doing something, because he was basically like, I'm going to start this guy to prove to you that he shouldn't be started. It was a weird sort of thing that he did in that game, and then they won that game, and then they just turned it around, right? Ole Miss versus Bama, LSU versus Bama, heck, even Texas A&M over Bama. All those are upsets that could have had Alabama kept at the same pace they were early in the season. Those could have lost all 3 of those games, and not only just not won them, they could have been underdogs in all those games. But they turned it around. So it's crazy that Bama even got to the SEC championship game, let alone won it in a huge upset as well. I think Georgia was probably the better team, but that's college football for you.
And they actually gave Michigan their toughest game of the entire season. Also, just to be clear, Nick Saban was not punishing his team. He punished all of college football with running those quarterbacks out. That was not an easy watch, even for those of us who really love the sport. That kind of challenged the loyalty. All right, so do either of you have any idea what this structure is? Any idea?
No idea.
I think I know. I think I know what it is. Is it a windmill?
No, it's not a windmill. It is the Smith Mansion in Wyoming. And why do I bring this up when I talk about the SEC? Because as I was going through my SEC and just how my predictions were coming together, I really felt like was looking at a house that I built without blueprints. And that's what this is. This is the most well-known house without blueprints. So this is basically, I'm going to refer to this a couple times later as you're going to see a lot of these opinions I have, I'm not really happy about. I don't know where to land in this conference. I'll just say that. Hopefully Brendan can help me. I don't know. You're probably a little more decided than I am, Robert, but the last segment's not going to be fun for me. I'll just say that. Just a little spoiler there. With that, here's our glossary. Just take a screenshot, save it in your Sharpest College Football Podcast workbook, and refer to it throughout this and throughout the season. This explains all the metrics that I refer to through this and other previews and throughout the season. The SEC overview. Of course, a lot of green all over the place. Not surprising. This figures to be probably the best conference this season, as we all know. They add Texas and Oklahoma. They end divisional play, which is going to be really interesting in this conference. They were by far the biggest portal winner in terms of adding Ryan. Let's see, more than half the conference was basically elite in terms of adding receiving yards through the transfer portal. As a now Big Ten guy, this one hurts me a little bit, but this is pretty much by far the best quarterback conference in all of FBS. You have 7 quarterbacks with an apex of 122 or higher this season that are returning to the SEC. And then they add both Diego Pavia with a apex of 113 and Taylon Green with a apex of 110 to a deep conference. So this should be the best offensive conference this season. Didn't have them as such last season. I had actually the Pac-12 ahead of them, and I had them just a little bit ahead of the Big Ten. But I think that they're basically the conference this season. You agree with that, Brendan?
100%. The SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma, that further emphasizes that. Even if they didn't have them, I would still make the argument that the SEC is the best conference in America. And when you look at the quarterbacks specifically, you lose a Heisman Trophy winner at LSU and Jane Daniels, and this is still a really talented quarterback group with Carson Beck, who's one of the Heisman favorites. Jalen Milroe probably going to be in that Heisman race as well. Jackson Dart, Jackson Arnold, Quinn Ewers, Nico at Tennessee. So there's just a lot of talent. Just overall, it's the most talented conference in the country.
Yeah, Robert, you remember last year when we previewed the SEC, but in one of our season previews, we were actually talking about how down it was in the quarterback room. And boy, the SEC just shoved that in our face with this quarterback performance last season.
Yeah, so to be fair, I still think, because the quarterbacks last year for the SEC it was really rough, to be fair. I actually don't think the SEC was the top conference last year. They didn't win the national title, which is a metric you can use for that. But again, you're looking at the fact that, honestly, top down, the Big Ten was better, and I think you can make an argument that at least a large part of the Pac-12 was better than a lot of the SEC teams. So this was not the top team in the country, not the top conference. But I think this year it has gotten a lot deeper. But I think there's a lot of a reason for that is the fact that, like, Carson Beck, we had a lot of question marks about him last year. He did really well. So now that's a top quarterback. Jalen Milroe, a lot of question marks about him. I still think some question marks about him, but undoubtedly an above average quarterback. So that's good. Graham Mertz, a quarterback with a lot of questions we had last year. He's better. So I think this isn't necessarily the fact that, the conference has gotten better. It's just a lot of people we had massive question marks about last year. Some of those question marks have been a bit resolved this year, I think.
Yeah, very fair point said. All right. And with that, we will get to our team previews. The first one is Georgia, not the defending champs. I think I have them as a top defense or top offense this season. Hard to argue with that. They ranked third in all of FBS in Ryan this year. They added a boatload of receiving yards to the portal. Really disappointed me on defense. You might remember that going into last season, I actually had a quick preview on them. I had their improvement metric as 105, which is literally the highest I've ever measured in 5 seasons. And their defensive rating basically was flat from a 6.9 to a 7.0. I thought that literally was going to be one of the best defenses we've ever seen last season. In SEC play, their defensive rating was only a 5.3. It's like they actually got worse when they even adjusted for opponent. This 5.3 is the same as, Their overall rating was literally the same as Florida State. And everybody was saying, oh, Florida State, weak defense, only an offensive team. Hey, guess what? You just described Georgia by my metrics. Really, it was the run defense that was a problem here. 31st in defensive yards per rush, which was fourth in the SEC, and 31st in all of FBS in defensive GGAB, which is fifth in the SEC. I don't understand that. And I'm starting to think that, and you see this all the time in these top programs, you hit the mountaintop and then you just go down to that next gear. I'm just thinking that you might see like that really good but not great gear out of this program right now. When they do that, some programs will make another run at towards the top. But I've just got questions based on what I saw last season about the defense. It doesn't make sense based on really what they should have done. And this season, they play the rest of the SEC top four all on the road. What happened to the SEC and hooking up the top of your conference? They're at Alabama, at Texas, and at Ole Miss. My goodness. In their favor, in their last five, they only have one true road game, which is nice. Talk about a gentle landing here between UMass and Georgia Tech. My goodness. The season win total is 10.5. There's no way I'm going to lay money with those three road games. I just can't. Favorites to win the SEC at plus 190. That's just short for me. I'm not bearish, but I'm certainly not bullish on the Bulldogs, just to over alliterate. Are you as concerned about me, or am I just coming from a place of paranoia, Brendan?
I actually think you're pretty spot on with this. I also want to bring up a different point that really cannot be encapsulated in numbers and statistics. We've seen some off the field issues from Georgia recently, whether it be driving arrests or just other arrests in general. How does that affect the team? We don't know. It's been a persistent issue for a couple of years, I think, now. So we'll see, because that's always a factor that you can't really predict. So is that going to affect them? Is that not going to affect them? I don't know. In terms of just strictly on the field production, it's going to be hard for Georgia. Once you're at the top, it's very difficult to maintain at the top. That's why Nick Saban was so great. Dabo, during his couple-year run there with Clemson when he was at the top of his game, he was a heck of a coach. I think he still is a heck of a coach, but that's a different conversation. But, yeah, I think Georgia, I just don't think they're the same team as they were in 2021 and 2022. Now, I don't think they're awful. Don't get me wrong. I think they're still a national title contender. They were a very good team last year. They just happened to lose in that SEC championship game. And in any other season, a 12-1 Georgia makes the playoff, right? A 4-team playoff. It just happened that the scenarios didn't work out in their favor. So to me, there's still some work to be done. I don't think the depth is similar to what Georgia had in 2021 and 2022. But yeah, I think Georgia, they should be favorites for the SEC. They should have a high win total, but to me, I still have some questions with Georgia. I don't think they're a for sure lock to make the SEC championship game.
Agree, although probably I can't see them not making the playoff. That's a bit much.
That's a bit much for me too, but SEC championship game with that schedule too, you mentioned it, at Alabama, at Texas, at Ole Miss. They got Tennessee at home. That Auburn game could be tricky as well, coming after at Kentucky, at Alabama, and coming home for that Auburn game. So schedule is not favorable for them by any stretch of the imagination. Completely agree. I think missing the 12-team playoff is a little unrealistic. However, the SEC championship game appearance, I think that's up in the air. I do not have them as a lock to make Atlanta.
Yeah, agree. What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, this team is a bit complicated to peg down specifically, right? I mean, you make good points. This is not the same dominant team. It's not exactly the same. Again, it's a good team, but the whole purpose of this is to try to quantify what does good mean, right? This team is like, I think the floor for this team is 10-2, and we say this, we gotta be careful we don't end up in a bulletin board in Athens somewhere for motivation or something, as Kirby Smart said last year. I don't know who those people were that said they were going to go 8-4 or miss a bowl or something, whatever. But this is the point where this is a good team, but is this a 12-0 team or is this a 10-2 team, right? That's the thing. And yeah, I think a lot has been made about, and a lot will be made about, Texas and Oklahoma, the SEC makes them a much more powerful conference. And yes, I guess in terms of dollars, it does. But, like, Oklahoma is not necessarily on the same caliber as this. And I think Texas, to some extent, may get a bit of a rude awakening here with the fact that, like, Texas is really, and we'll talk about Texas a bit more later, but, like, I think the problem for Georgia is probably gonna be I don't. This is the thing, right? If you told me Georgia went 12-0, I'd be like, okay, that makes sense. But if you also said Georgia went 10-2, I could find you the losses on this schedule, right? It's
Yeah.
oh, okay, Texas was better than we thought, or oh, you know what, Ole Miss had a really good game, or oh, Tennessee was really good, or you know what, oh, maybe Alabama actually was good this year, right? And or some combination of all those things, right? But it's really hard. I'm not touching the over under on this. I'm not touching SEC champs on those are both way too short. But at the same time, I would not be surprised either way. Again, I think that now because of the 12-team playoff, there's literally no way Georgia doesn't get in. And I think the tiebreaker for Georgia not getting in was them not getting in this last year. I think if there's anything even remotely close, they're going to say we owed them. And to be fair, they did, because I'm fairly sure if Georgia had made it, they probably would have won the college football playoff, to be fair, right? This is where it's very weird. This team seems a bit worse than before, right? And you make reference to the DUI arrests and just the fact that we've seen it in the past, right? With TCU, right? TCU had a dominant regular season back just 2 years ago. Dominant regular season, lost in the conference championship game, they still put them in. Now, again, not exactly the same, different circumstances, but if Georgia had been blowing out people all year long by 40, 50 points, if their next closest game had been like a 30-point win, they would have put them in. They would have said, you know what, screw it, we're putting them in ahead of Alabama or ahead of Texas or something. They would have done that, but they didn't, because they would have been one loss and the other ones would have been one loss too. But and it's a weird point to it, but it's not as dominant. Now again, dominant is basically subjective. Dominant being like, okay, they won every game, but some of these games somewhat close, right? Not every single one of these was a blowout, right? You beat Missouri by 9, right?
They
You
were in
beat
trouble with that
Georgia
game
Tech.
too.
Yeah, you beat Georgia Tech by 8. I'm looking at some of these now, right? You only beat Auburn by 7. You beat Florida pretty heavily by 23. But this is the thing, and you blew out Tennessee. But this is the thing. This was far from the dominant Georgia team we had seen in years past. It's really questionable as to where this team lands. Is this a 10-2 or is this a 12-0 team? I think they lose a game. I don't know what game that is, but if I had to put something, I'd probably be over 10.5, because I think it's something like 11-1, and they make the conference championship. But if you told me 10-2, I could definitely see that as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just curious how much of my suspicions are actually going to be served out here. And maybe that doesn't catch up until the playoffs, or it's hard to even find a really top. And they are the top team, so that's what makes this a really weird season coming into it. A weird preseason, I guess I'd say, as much as anything.
At a certain point for this team, losses will hit them, right? We've been like how many first round draft picks have come out of Georgia on defense? The entire Philadelphia Eagles defense is from Georgia now. At a certain point, those losses do add up. And it's hard to keep replacing. This is why you see some of the dynasties, like the Clemson dynasty, even to a lesser extent the Alabama dynasty. These dynasties go because eventually you just hit a bad patch of recruiting where you're like, okay, we take a shot. Like, functionally, recruiting is gambling. There you go. There's the header for this episode. But basically, you're betting on, I think this kid is good. And if this kid is good, then great, you're set. But eventually, you basically make picks on kids, and they turn out to be not good, right? And that's the problem. Now, obviously not all of them are bad. Obviously, some of them are still good. But if you stop hitting that same batch of recruiting and you're just not as good as the ones that came before, that's when you start getting in trouble as a team. And I think we're going to probably hit that sometime soon with Georgia. I just don't know if it's this year, though.
And to Brendan's point about what made Saban so great, a lot of the times you're actually getting higher caliber recruits after you've won that championship, but you don't have the guys that like know all the hard work it takes to get there, and they just show up and say, "Hey, I'm a Georgia Bulldog, or I'm a USC Trojan. Where's my ring?" And they don't really get that, and they have to learn that the hard way. And we might be seeing that. I don't know. That'll be interesting to see. All right, so your actual SEC champs last season, the Crimson Tide of Alabama. Kalen DeBoer with an amazing career record. I don't think a lot of people don't really realize just how awesome his career record is. 12 losses. Really? What happened here, Kalen? My gosh. He replaces Nick Saban. Little concerned about the OC, Nick Sheridan. Remember that Grubb went over and was the OC for a day until, I guess, the portal closed, and then he went to go take the Seahawks OC job. Interesting. Sheridan was the tight ends coach under Washington. Maybe DeBoer gets more and more involved in the offense. A tough place to get more involved with one side of the ball when you're in a job of this size. Not that Washington isn't a big job, but Alabama is just totally different. Jalen Milroe, I have as the top returning quarterback in the SEC, numbered FBS with that gaudy apex of 170. I'm interested, and we can talk about this after I'm done, but I'm interested about Milroe versus Penix and Haener, like the other quarterbacks that had success under DeBoer. Receiving's a question mark for me along these lines, too, about what Milroe is going to look like in this offense. 13th in the SEC in 2024 Ryan. They were 12th in how much Ryan they added in the offseason. New defensive coordinator is Kane Womack. He was the head coach at South Alabama. He worked with DeBoer at Indiana. He replaces Kevin Steele, who I guess seemed like, I don't think he's working now. So who knows how much he had invested. Favorable schedule. They only get one of the top four in the SEC. It's hosting Georgia. Season wins 9.5. The under's taking a lot of money. SEC champs at 750. I was bullish on this team in our futures episode. I've just got more questions as I'm digging it now, and it really goes down to this offense. I'll throw it to you on this, Brendan. Milroe versus Penix and Haener, and I think they're probably going to be a little bit questionable at wide receiver. Penix threw a nice deep ball. Haener did everything well. Doesn't really seem like they threw a lot of short stuff, and because that's the one thing that Milroe struggled with, where he has question marks, is the short stuff. But Milroe, I think, is a way better athlete than either of these guys. I'm just all over the map on what this offense is going to look like, so I can't play him. Do you have anything more definite for me on what this offense is going to be?
It's hard to say because DeBoer is going to have to adjust a little bit because Milroe has a different skill set than what Penix brought to the table and what Haener brought to the table. Like Penix, excellent pocket passer, and he would stand in there, step up in the pocket, really good pocket awareness, really good accuracy. Milroe, more of probably a better athlete, but probably better with his legs. So how does DeBoer take advantage of that? How does DeBoer use his skill set? I think that's a question. I don't think the receiving group is up to what DeBoer wants at Alabama, and I think they're going to have to depend a little bit on some of those young guys. I think of Ryan Williams, he's a true freshman, Caleb Odom. Jeremy Bernard's a solid transfer from Washington, so there's some familiarity there with the system, with DeBoer's system, with Jeremy Bernard. But yeah, I have a little bit of questions at the wide receiver position, but I'm not totally concerned about it per se. But I do the staff. Again, losing Grubb might hurt a little bit, but Womack, I think, was an excellent hire at defensive coordinator. I think that's an upgrade there. I just think overall the staff is an upgrade, which sounds crazy to say because he's taking over for Nick Saban. I know DeBoer is probably not better than Saban, but the entirety of the staff, I feel, is better. Now, we'll see if that comes to fruition during the season, but that's what I believe right now. I think the entirety of the staff is better this year than it has been in years past with Alabama.
Yeah. Do you have any opinion on the 9.5? There's so many questions here. I'm just stepping away. I can't really play this at all.
I lean towards probably just not betting it at all because the game at Wisconsin is going to be tough. Game against Georgia is going to be tough. At Tennessee is always difficult. Third Saturday in October there, and you're traveling to Neyland. And remember the last time they were in Neyland. And then after that, you got Missouri and LSU, Oklahoma. Yeah. So I know they don't play some of those top teams. Like I don't see Ole Miss on that schedule. I don't see Texas on that schedule. But the SEC is still a gauntlet, even if you don't play some of those top teams, because you got, like I said, Tennessee, Missouri, LSU, and then in that 3-game stretch there. So I would stay away from the 9.5. Honestly, where I place Alabama right now heading into the season, I think they're on that bubble of making that 12-team playoff. So I'm bordering right where Vegas has them around 9-3, 10-2.
Yeah. Splitting the difference, I think. You got anything more definitive on Alabama, Robert?
Brendan said a lot of the things that I was gonna kind of say. I was nodding along there, a lot of the same points. I view Alabama as basically the mirror image of Michigan. I think both have similar kind of trajectories, right? Long-term coaches that, okay, Harbaugh went to the NFL, Saban just retired. But they are both coaches that had established legacies, really good coaches, and now they're being replaced by new guys. Obviously, DeBoer, and then I think the one from Michigan as well. I think he was internal, right? I think. Yeah, the Michigan hire was internal, right? Yeah. I view them as the same, where they are both at the top of their conference, but now they're going to be stepping down a rung to that 2, 3, like that. And this is the Penn State tier, I call it, right? They win the games they should win. They lose the games they should lose, right? On the schedule, I see Georgia, Tennessee, LSU. There's your 3 losses right there. There's your under 9.5, right? That I could see that. Oklahoma, that's just off the top. Oklahoma, questionable, possible as well. Auburn, That's never a fun game either way. And Wisconsin, I see those 3 losses off the top, and then there's even more downside risk outside of that. As of Kalen DeBoer, I think the question mark really comes into how he's coached at those other places. Again, not this is not knocking Kalen DeBoer as a bad coach, but it's very clear when you see Washington the last couple of years, because Penix and Hainer, both pocket passers. These are guys step back in the pocket, throw it 30, 40 yards down the field, right? And they're wide receivers. You look at Roma Dunze, Jalen Polk, right? These guys are tall guys and fast guys. Basically, it's run, jump up, catch the ball, and then that's it, right? Or basically catch the ball in space and then run in yard after the catch, right? These are not contested catch guys. These guys get the ball because they're taller than the other people, right? The second those guys go up against people who are their size, they have problems with it, right? And you look back to Washington's season last year, the second they run up against a team that has a good defense, which was Michigan, which was their best defense they played all year. Texas defense not that good. The second they played a good defense, they got shut down. Michigan's defense is the level of defense you can expect basically every week in the SEC. Basically, not exactly, but that's the defense Georgia's going to throw at you. That's similar-ish defense Tennessee's going to throw at you. Definitely Missouri, and then also LSU. The Brian Kelly defense should probably improve, right? If you're now looking at the point where, okay, we can't just throw it for 300 yards a game, you now also have a more mobile quarterback, which can work to your advantage. But again, if you're used to scheming up every single one of your plays with our guys are just faster and taller than the other guys, if suddenly now you're facing cornerbacks that are the same height and athleticism, that's going to be a real problem. Now, that's not to say this is a bad hire. I think long term he will be fine, but it's going to take adjustment to those SEC defenses. And he still has more talent, right? The thing, though, that is interesting, though, is that we've talked for a couple of years now about Alabama regressing. Every year we say, okay, this is going to be a rebuilding year, and then somehow they overperform expectations. Now, a lot of us have chalked that up to Nick Saban just existing around the program, and I think that's what it is. But they just keep overperforming. If that doesn't happen, if Nick Saban is gone from that equation, does this team regress down to an 8-4, a 7-6? Right? Is that what happens? Is the talent just better than that, right? That's the question we have to see. So I think this team is very unlikely to make I think this team is unlikely to make the college football playoff. I think Brendan has them as a bubble team. I'd be if this team actually did make the college football playoff, I think I'd be much more surprised than not surprised if they made it. But again, I need to see the talent level, right? Because losing Saban definitely did not help the talent level of this team, right? I think in a year or two this team could be really good. And if Kalen DeBoer figures out how to pass for 500 yards against an SEC defense, that would be really fun, and I'm looking forward to that. But I don't think that's happening this year.
Good point about the luck too. This was a lucky team, 2.5 games of luck, so they had pretty extreme luck. Now they keep their quarterback. I don't know. I'm going to get in the whole Jalen Milroe making light bend discussion. So I'll just say that there could be regression here for this team, just based on just luck alone. All right. So one team that a lot of people see maybe just sneaking into the spot that Bama had is the Ole Miss Rebels. Lane Kiffin's done a very good job there. I don't have a lot here. Obviously, there's a lot of green here. We've got a lot of yardage returning. We've got a really good quarterback returning. I just don't see them as good as everybody else. I had their offense as 7th in the SEC. I had their defense as 8th in the SEC. Did have, I don't know, they were a fun team to watch because they scored a lot of points. But I don't know if their schedule is that tough. Their best wins last season were LSU, good, nice, 9-3 team. Texas A&M, who fired their coach. That's their 2 best wins. They get a favor with the schedule. Another one, tell me if you've heard this one before. They host Georgia. That's their only top four opponent here. The over 9.5 is taking some money here, which I guess I can see. I think they'll probably be favored in 11 games, but man, it's not like the rest of them are not losable. Champs plus 650. I guess if you like them, that seems fair, but I'm just not with the market in terms of like them being like this ready for the SEC playoffs. I just think the market's overvaluing them. Now, I know they brought in a lot of portal guys and they're not reflected in my numbers because I see running backs as interchangeable. But I don't know. I'm not playing either side of the win total here. But Robert, you were pretty bearish on them last year too, more specifically on defense than anything else. Are you of the same mind as me that like the market just might be a little over their skis for the Rebels?
Maybe. I've never I didn't like this team last year. They definitely overperformed my expectations. But again, it was the whole SEC as a whole was down, so that makes a bit more sense. If, like, I thought the SEC was going to be better, but it turns out they were worse than they were just better by comparison. I think not Saban, Lane Kiffin has developed into a good coach here, and he has built a pretty good program. I still just don't think this team. Again, Jackson Dart is good, but still limited though. I don't think he's definitely not one of the top quarterbacks in the country, but a good quarterback. But we're not talking like Heisman. I don't think we're really talking Heisman level winner for Jackson Dart. Good stat line, but not insane stat line. But again, I think this is a team I could see the 9.5. Right? Okay, they've got Georgia, you've got LSU, and you have Florida, and you have Oklahoma and Kentucky. So you've got good teams on there, right? I could see it, but again, this is again Penn State tier, the tier of like, okay, lose to Georgia, they might lose to LSU, but then they probably lose another random game somewhere in there. Because I think last year they lost a game they shouldn't have lost. No, they did. They actually won all the games. Yeah,
Yeah,
they only lost to Bama and Georgia. So they've cleaned that up, which is a stat I do when I see a team winning the games they should be winning and then losing the games. It generally means that they're like they know what they're doing. They're taking care. They're not basically wasting time in off weeks and getting stupid losses. So I do that as a sign. But again, I just don't think the talent level is there. I think this team is a good team. I could see this team sneaking into the SEC championship game, but I don't think this team is better than Georgia. So
wow. Brendan, are you seeing, I guess, when you did your preview, did, were you as bullish on the Rebels as the market seems to be and just really believing that, this is like a top 8 team nationally?
I think they are. Like you look at,
Wow.
I think this team is going. Their record is going to be better than the talent that they have. I think they're over. They're gonna. I think they're going to overperform this year. You look at last year; they had a lot of close wins, like the LSU game, A&M game, a lot of one possession wins. So just in general, like speaking on trends here, that typically reverses the year after. I see that luck rating on the screen there. That's red. So I guess if you're speaking on trends, can expect that to reverse. Maybe they lose some more close games than they win. But I look at the schedule, and this thing is as favorable as it gets in the SEC. Look at those first 4 games. You got 3 cupcake games with Furman, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, even at Wake Forest. That should be a comfortable win based on what I saw from Wake Forest last year. I just don't think Wake can compete in kind of the transfer portal NIL world. And in SEC play, you got teams that I expect to finish in the bottom half of the SEC, like Kentucky, South Carolina, Arkansas. Florida might not even have a head coach by the time Mississippi plays them. Mississippi State, year one of their head coach, Jeff Lebby. And then the tough teams you do play, you get Oklahoma at home, you get Georgia at home, which is very favorable. But yeah, to me, I think this team should be favored in 11 games. Even at LSU, I think they should be favored. And if I were to bet this, I'd definitely hit the over on it and on 9.5. I think this team can make the SEC championship game. Now, I think they're a tier below kind of those national championship contenders who, to me, are like the Georgias, the Ohio States, Oregon, maybe even Texas. I think they're a tier below them. But I definitely think this team it can make a college football playoff semifinal, can make the SEC championship game. They got the offensive talent. Need to figure out some things defensively. That's why I think they're a step below the Georgia, Ohio State, the Oregons of the world. But I really like Ole Miss heading into the year, partly because of that schedule and just all the starters that they have returning. They have a lot of returning experience coming back. So I'm excited to see what they do. And I think they recognize that this is their year, right? Mississippi is not going to contend year in and year out for a national title, but this is their best chance maybe they've ever had at winning a national championship, making it far in the playoffs. So I think they recognize that. I think Lane Kiffin recognizes that. I think they're going to be a team on a mission this year. I fully expect 10, 11 wins from this team.
Wow. Yeah, I guess to your point, a lot of that could be a function of the schedule too.
Yeah, like I said, I think this team, talent-wise, if they were to play a different schedule, I'm not as high on them. So it does have a lot to do with the schedule. I think the record's going to be better than what the team actually is, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I'm really curious about that defense too. I'm just having some nightmare flashbacks here. Kiffin in 3+ seasons at USC, he had one okay defense, and that was it. He had a couple of really shaky defenses, and interesting that kind of seems like there might be a ceiling in how good the defense at Ole Miss can be under him. And it's Ole Miss, in fairness to him. If it was, it's going to be a different ceiling there versus at Alabama. All right. Wow. Be interesting to see how that one shakes out. We've got very different opinions on this team. I'm not happy about this. I have Texas as projecting as the number 2 offense this season. Experienced and at quarterback with a very nice apex here. You've got a ton of returning experience on the offensive line. Sark has really put together some really good talent down the lines. Apex, or I have Ewers with the 10th apex among all the FBS returning starters. I think their defense, I'm more bullish on their defense than Robert is, although sometimes they didn't really feel like stopping the pass too much. That's a lot of yards they gave up, although their defensive apex was good. So there's probably just a lot of attempts in this number here. Again, one of these teams that of the top 4 in the SEC, the only one they get is hosting Georgia. They only have 4 road games this season, only 3 road games in the conference because they have that neutral site against Oklahoma. Their second road game isn't until October 26th. This road schedule is, unless you think that Michigan just doesn't miss a beat, and I don't think I have to argue too strenuously against the Sparty fan here on that one, that's their toughest road game. Kyle Field is not easy, but we'll get to that in a second. What's interesting, too, is I looked at the mean and the median opponent power rating last year and this year. The mean opponent power rating, it is unchanged, which is crazy. Probably because they played Alabama and that drew their average up. Tiny difference, but just real insignificant in the median difference. I think they're going to assimilate more quickly to the SEC than people are thinking. I don't know. I just can't. Probably I see them the most likely SEC champs. This is where I wind up on the Smith Mansion here because I somehow like them the best. I cannot pick them because I've yelled for years and years when people would say, you know what? Sark stinks as a coach. We picked USC number 8 in the preseason. They won it barely ranked. And I would always think to myself, well, you dope. He's bad as a coach. Why are you picking them in the top 8? Why is that not part of your prediction process? I don't know what to do with this team. I have them as the most likely, but I'm really not happy about it. I don't know what to do, and Robert's not going to be objective about this. So, Brendan, I'll get your opinion on this first, please.
Yeah, I think the mean opponent power is quite interesting. I'm looking at the 2023 schedule right now, and they did have a decently tough schedule for being a Big 12 team. Alabama obviously increases that strength of schedule, but they play Kansas, Oklahoma, Kansas State, at TCU, at Iowa State. Oklahoma State as well in the Big 12 championship game. So they had a decently tough schedule for being a Big 10 or for being a Big 12 team. And now year 1 in the SEC, this is a pretty favorable schedule. You look at, I think they start off the year quite easy with Colorado State, UTSA, and Louisiana Monroe, but that Michigan game is going to be tough. It's not going to be easy. Yeah, I think Michigan's going to take a step back, but we'll see. We'll see how much they take a step back. But I think Texas should be favored. I think they will win that game, but it'll be interesting to see. And then Oklahoma's not going to be easy. Georgia's not going to be easy, but they get Georgia at home again. And I mean, Oklahoma's at a neutral site, so it's 50-50 crowd split there, but you look at those last, 5 games, starting with Vanderbilt. They have a pretty nice runway heading into postseason play, I guess. I mean, with Vandy, Florida, who might not have a coach at that time. Arkansas might not have a coach at that time if things go sour for them. Kentucky's a solid program under Mark Stoops, but Texas out-talents them. At Texas A&M is going to be tough, though. But to me, Texas, it's a favorable schedule. Returning quarterback in Quinn Ewers. Running back has all of a sudden become a big question mark for them because C.J. Baxter's now out. They had another backup running back that got injured. Can't remember his name, but a lot of this is going to fall on Jaden Blue at the running back position. So we'll see how he does this year. I like the receiving core. I know it's all pretty much transfers, but I think they'll be solid there. I'm not worried about the offense whatsoever with Texas. I trust Sark in that respect. Defensively, I think that run defense is going to take a little bit of a hit. You're losing those 2 big interior guys on the defensive line, so it's going to take a hit. Interested to see how improved the pass defense is going to be because I do think they passed a little bit more against Texas last year because of that interior, the defensive line, how good they were at stopping the run. So that's why those numbers were probably a little bit skewed there. But yeah, Texas, to me, some question marks a little bit defensively, but I think the offense is not going to miss a beat at all. I think they might even be improved from last year. So I'm excited to see what this team looks like in year one in the SEC. I don't think there's going to be a massive adjustment period for them because of this light schedule.
I'm going to be really mean to Robert and throw it to him in a really pointed way. Robert, there's no way that Texas is less than a 10-point favorite in any of those last 10 games, right?
Last 10 games.
Or last 5 games, sorry.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say, it's Georgia. Okay. If you're giving me 10 points for Texas A&M, I'm taking that. At Kyle Field, yeah.
That number might be out already. Let me look.
Actually, that number probably is out, actually. Let's see that. That's a good point.
I'm seeing Texas minus 3.5 right now at Texas A&M.
No way. That's a joke. 3.5. Okay. All right. If only my unlicensed book had look-ahead lines like that, I'd be all over that.
No, so actually I'll kick it off by actually absolving Texas of the pass defense. Again, they actually did have a lot of leads in some of the blowout games, so they probably passed on them in kind of garbage times. And to be fair, if you're up 30, but it doesn't really matter that much. But again, there's something positive. There we go. Now the negative. So here's the thing. I'm still not the biggest fan of Quinn Ewers. I know a lot of people are a huge fan of him. He's one of the Heisman favorites, I believe. NFL scouts, not the biggest fan of Quinn Ewers. He could have left. He could be in the NFL right now if he wanted to, and he's not. So that tells you something right there. It's just this team it is really interesting, the mean and the median power ranking, that they're basically the same. That actually is really fascinating. I actually thought for sure that the mean and the median definitely went up this year, but I guess not. But to be fair, though, they've basically replaced bottom rung Big 12 teams for Colorado State and UTSA, right? Who was their non-conference last year? Their non-conference was Rice, Alabama, Wyoming, and that was it, right? So now it's Colorado State, UTSA, and ULM. Okay, yeah, that's down, but everything else I think is up. If that, actually, it's Michigan. Sorry, Michigan's in there now too. So Michigan replaces Alabama roughly, and then it's UTSA, Colorado State, and ULM instead of Rice, Wyoming, and I think that was it actually. Or one of them is a non-conference game. I think one of the games they played was a non-conference game, but whatever. At BYU maybe, I don't know, but whatever. The point is the fact that Oklahoma is still a game that is always a very competitive game. You know, it does honestly. This is never a blowout. It always seems the team is the underdog in this game usually somehow wins this game. So that's a potential loss for them as well. Georgia, another huge potential loss. They could have problems against Georgia. At Vanderbilt, that could be the perfect spot for Diego Pavia to have a big game. Florida, you could be looking again. Florida may not have a coach by then. We don't know, but if they do have issues on pass defense, that Graham Mertz can take advantage of that. And then Texas A&M, you're going up against a potentially good Texas A&M this year. So that's not to say Texas is bad. I'm just saying that if you're trying to bet the over 10.5, you have to make sure that neither of those ones, that they win basically every single one of those games, with the exception of maybe the Georgia one or something else. Like you only get one error there. At that point, those are all potential pitfalls you can have. This team is probably good, but the thing is that they do play a lot of close games. Like last year, they had to take Kansas State to overtime to beat them. They beat Houston by 7. They beat TCU by 3 somehow, despite being 12-point favorites, right? This is the kind of stuff Texas has done. And this is not the first time Texas has played a bad opponent close. They do this many times, right? And the argument is that, okay, that bad opponent used to be Kansas State. Now it's Florida. That bad opponent used to be TCU. Now it's Texas A&M. Now it's Vanderbilt, right? The argument is that the bad teams that they're playing are now just slightly better, and that the median team is a bit better. But the data doesn't exactly prove that. It's just a tad higher, 1.8 to 2.0. I feel like those games where Texas messes around that they should win, I feel like that's going to lead to a loss this year. And I think that you don't have especially if you're betting the over 10.5, that's a problem. I think this team you could see this team be like a 10-2 team, a 9-3 team. I don't think a 9-3 team makes the college football playoff. I think a 10-2 team probably does, depending on what happens in the Big Ten with, say, Nebraska or something. But I think that's the argument here of like how catastrophic was the unintended loss And I think that's the question that defines their season.
Wow. All right. Two points. First of all, you are not alone in not being a believer in Quinn Ewers. Shout out to Jeremy at Newport Beach Equinox, big Longhorns fan, who his scenario is Ewers will not be effective against Michigan, and by halftime of that game and for the rest of the season, it's Arch Manning and a quarterback. So we will see about that. A little less realistic is the Diego Pavia game, although with Sark, you never know. That's why I'm not really excited about this prediction. And they were lucky. Now, they were lucky because they had good quarterback coaching. I just need to be. I really need to see it where Sark can get extreme luck two seasons in a row. I don't like where I landed on this team, and I just have to move on because the SEC is a mess to me. I don't know what to expect. I don't know how I'm going to answer my questions at the end of the pod. It's still a mystery to me. All right. LSU, season under Brian Kelly, their offense was the highest ever measured by my metrics going back to 2016. So yes, this was better than that vaunted 2019 LSU offense. Surprised me, but I have it here. Yeah. The only apex I've ever measured going back to 2012 that was higher than Jaden Daniels was Grayson McCall in that crazy Coastal Carolina season. There's Even though they lose a lot with Daniels and Denbrock going to Notre Dame, they're eighth in FBS in Ryan this season. They have a very experienced offensive line. Brian Kelly's teams tend to have really good offensive lines. Clearly, the problem was the defense. They ranked 86th in FBS, 14th in the SEC last season. I'm not sure I get this. I do and I don't. So Blake Baker, according to Phil Steele, is the highest paid assistant in college football, which I'm of two minds here. I love this. Missouri's defensive rating increased by 10 points, which is insane in his first season. Last season, they took a little step back, and I don't remember ever watching Missouri and thinking, there's a team that's really well coached. They seemed to be in a lot of shootouts last season. Now, they had an offense to cause that, but their defense really was forgiving last season. Actually, I got the, yeah. Now, who knows what he's going to do with this team? I don't know if, I think Matt House is like a linebackers coach in the NFL. Their former defensive coordinator. I don't know how much of last season's defense was a question of talent or coaching or what. I like Brian Kelly. You've just got some huge new pieces coming in, and maybe Baker is an upgrade. The 9 seems fair. I have no interest in betting. Again, this is another team where I can't make up my mind in the. I don't know if things fall totally. Maybe there's value at 10-1. Although this is quite a delta here. Now Nussmeier had one start. Apex 109 is nice, but I don't know. And I think their new offensive coordinator was an internal hire too, which I'm not really a fan of. I don't know what to make of this team other than faith in Brian Kelly, a lot of receivers, and a good offensive line, but still to be determined in terms of my outlook. Are you more definitive on them than me, Brandon?
They're question mark defensively, especially for me. I don't think they did a good enough job in the portal of acquiring guys, especially on the interior of that defensive line. So I think that there's staff upgrades there on the defensive side with Kevin Peoples, Blake Baker, new DC. So I think the defense will slightly improve. I just don't think they have the personnel there to compete at an SEC championship level. Even to like Ole Miss's level defensively, I just don't think they're there yet personnel-wise.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a few years to get the guys they want on campus. So I think defense is still going to be a weakness for them, but slightly improved. However, I think the offense is going to slightly be worse. I mean, you're losing Jaden Daniels. You're losing some key receivers. I think Garrett Nussmeier is going to be a very good quarterback, but he has a lot to live up to from what Jaden Daniels did last year. So I think there's going to be a slight step down at wide receiver as well. Offensive line, I think, will be solid, as you referred to. But yeah, overall, I just think LSU take a step back offensively, take a slight step forward defensively. So I still think it's going to be a similar record as last year, like 8-4, 9-3 type team here. And you look at the schedule, they USC game. Week 1 is interesting to me because these are two teams that both have defensive struggles, but both really good offensive teams. So that to me is a really intriguing game right off the bat in Week 1. But some of these other games, I could see them losing Ole Miss. At Texas A&M is going to be tough. Alabama's going to be tough. Overall, though, they don't play a ton of super difficult opponents. I don't see Texas there. I don't see Georgia there. So there's some winnable games there. Now, I don't think this is a playoff team personally. Like I said, I think it's more of an 8-4, 9-3, similar type of level team that we saw last year.
Yeah, I agree with that. You make a good point where just I can't see them really actually being within. I see them a definite cut below Ole Miss just as a stalking horse on both sides of the ball. I just don't see them there. Good point about the schedule being a little more forgiving this season. Also, in that USC game, you've got two new defensive coordinators too for these teams that were mirror images of each other. Every preview was like, oh, here's the top two offenses in my metrics. It was LSU and USC. And by the way, their defenses both suck too. I don't know. Robert, are you wait and see on the Tigers also just to make this like the whole SEC so far? Just okay, let's wait and see.
Yeah, it's Ellis. The big question mark here is obviously the defense. Brian Kelly has done really well on offense the last couple of years, with Jaden Daniels specifically, really turning this team around in the last couple of years. But the defense really hurt them last year. And to be fair, I thought that would have cost Jalen Daniels, or
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, sorry, not the other Daniels,
Yeah.
Jaden Daniels, the Heisman. But unfortunately, somehow it didn't. So the thing is, though, and I think that's why you see that payment of the highest paid assistant in college football, right, to get you there. It's interesting. The third season under Brian Kelly, 20-7. That record feels very similar to basically an extrapolation back of like his record at Notre Dame. That feels very similar to like his Notre Dame records, right? Where it's, oh, we're really good, but right? It's, oh, we win a lot of games, but those against those really good teams, we just don't beat those really good teams, right? It feels so much like that of the this is, and to be fair, that's what we thought it was. And to be fair, he did take Alabama down 2 years ago. No, yes, he took them not last year, the year before. He took out down Bama, didn't take them down last year. What was the score last year against Bama? 28-14. They got blown out there, actually. They lost by 2 scores. It's a very interesting thing. If they can fix the defense, this team is really terrifying and looks really good. Nussmeier was obviously, or Nussmeier, he was the backup. He had to come in, if you remember correctly, for actually the SEC championship game back in 2022 when Jaden Daniels had, I think, was it a concussion or an injury? No, it was an injury, wasn't it? Was it a shoulder? It was some sort of injury. I can't remember, but he had to play for that game for them, and that they actually looked pretty good for a while in that game, and then eventually they just lost the game because Georgia was too powerful. But again, in his brief stint in that game, he was actually able to keep the offense running pretty good. So this team still has a lot of good pieces. The problem is just the defense. Can they figure out the defense? And if they can, then all of a sudden this goes from being like a Notre Dame level team, just Notre Dame in the SEC, to a team that can compete for the SEC championship. I think watch out for this team if they're, again, we'll see it in the first few weeks, right? Like USC, which actually funny, I've actually already bet USC in that game. But after that, though, right, they have Alabama. They can give Alabama problems. They basically always beat Florida no matter what happens. There's a couple of games on their schedule that could trip them up, but honestly, their schedule is relatively easy. There's not a ton on their schedule that's particularly difficult. This team, I think this team could actually like sneak into the SEC championship game. At that point, then it's just beating basically Georgia, right? If you can basically go undefeated through your SEC schedule, of which I think the toughest team on there is what, Bama? And Mississippi, okay, that's not impossible to win, right? And even then, even if you lose to Mississippi, Mississippi could very easily lose 2 SEC games, right? If you can go undefeated through your SEC schedule, you can very easily sneak into the championship game, and at that point, it's just okay, yeah, you have them at 10-1 when maybe they're only 3 or 4-1 to win the game, right? Honestly, picking them to make the SEC championship game is actually a pretty half decent bet. I think they could just sneak in there with the rest of the SEC beats itself up.
Yeah, you point out something good that I'd missed. Getting your toughest games, Mississippi and Alabama and Oklahoma, I think, all at home really helps. That, yeah, I don't know, it's hard to say that you clunk up in a conference this big into second place and make the title game, but yeah, I think the odds would, boy, have to take a longer look at that. That's interesting. Yeah, very forgiving schedule. That USC game is going to be really interesting. It's, boy, because Miller Moss has one career start too. It's really, the parallels are crazy. Missouri, weird. It seems like this is like the overrated slash underlooked, or it's like they've gotten. Missouri seems to have nationally gotten so much preseason pub, at least where I'm seeing, where they might be a little overrated, even though they're like everybody's. This team is underrated. I don't know. You guys are smart. You probably understand what I'm saying. Eli Drinkwitz, 28-21. He didn't take over like an awesome situation here. Their offensive rating in one season under Kirby Moore increased by almost 10 points. Number one, because he's brilliant. And number two, because he replaced Bush Hamden, who we'll get to later. Brady Cook, in one season, his apex increased by almost 60 points. They basically returned all of their receiving talent. Blake Baker, who we just talked about, went to LSU, is replaced by Corey Batoon, who was a defensive coordinator at South Alabama under now Alabama defensive coordinator Kane Womack. I'm don't know if I really like that. Not that I have anything in Mr. Batoon. I just think that defense is probably more of a Womack thing than a Batoon thing. Interesting that they only face one of the top four in the SEC if we're using the conference title odds as a proxy. And they get all the bottom four. So it's just very nice in terms of just a nice schedule. And maybe that'd be one of the reasons. Maybe that's one of the reasons they're getting a lot of preseason hype. Don't know what's going on with you're playing October 12th at UMass. Did you forget that you're an SEC team? I don't know how that happens. Season win total at 9.5. Sure, just the thing. I guess if you look at that, you look they're out of conference. They should go 4-0 and out of conference. So maybe that says basically it's 5 or 6 conference wins, which is not going to get you into the playoff. So that's probably where that conference champs number is so high. I've just seen people talk about them as like a top 10, top 12 team this season. In your preview, Brendan, do you have them this high or?
Yeah, again, I think this is a team that's their record is going to be better than what the actual makeup of the team is, just because I think that schedule is pretty light. You could not start the first 4 games. Maybe you couldn't even include the first 6 games. Those are all pretty winnable games. Toughest one being at Texas A&M there, but yeah, Missouri. Yeah. I think this team's going to take a little bit of a step back. Maybe not in terms of record-wise, because I think this schedule is actually lighter than it was last year. But just in terms of talent, you're losing a couple of key guys, right, at wide receiver, especially defensively as well in the secondary. So you do lose some key guys, lose some key coaches defensively as well. So Missouri, I think, like I said, I think a step back. But looking at that schedule, they get Oklahoma at home. They get Arkansas to end the season at home. And I'm not going to criticize the UMass game because I actually think that's cool. I actually think SEC teams should do this more. Power conference teams should do this more. Go on the road to G5 school. Makes it fun for those G5 schools. You get to host a big-time team like that. But, yeah, Missouri, to me, I think they're a bubble team to make the college football playoff this year. I really do. Based on that schedule, I like Brady Cook. Luther Burden's coming back. Yeah, I'm looking at that over-under of 9.5, and it's heavily juiced to the under.
Yeah.
So I do think there's value there with the over because I think they're going to start the season strong. You get some of your more difficult matchups at home. And you can still lose 2 games there and still hit the over, right? At Alabama, they're probably not going to be favored there. At Texas A&M, like I said, it's going to be tough. But the rest of those games, I think they're going to be favored. Maybe not with Oklahoma, but I think there's a good chance this team gets to double-digit wins once again. And I have them as a bubble team to make the playoff.
Okay. I can't disagree with any of that except for one point. SEC teams never, ever do something that's good for the game. They always look out for themselves and their conference, and that's it. I get your point, though. Very well said. Just like I guess my point is that doesn't seem like an SEC team. So,
I'm commending them for it, though.
Yeah. Brendan makes a good point that, especially with that under juice so hard, does that overlook a little bit tempting?
Yeah, I mean, it does a little bit. There's a couple things I will say in there, though, right? We just talked about LSU, the guy who poached their defense. That was really good, right? That'd be an area of regression. Offense is really good. A large part of that has been Brady Cook. He's been really good. My only thing about this team is just that every time we think we find an SEC team, this SEC team is going to be good this year. A couple years ago, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, it was Arkansas. I'm just trying to remember exactly which year it was.
I think it was the year before last.
I think it was the year before, right? Yeah.
Nobody believed in Dan Enos. We'll get to him.
That's right. It was 9-4, and people were like, "All right, Arkansas is a good team this year, guys. We're a good team." And then they go 7-8, and then they go down to 4-9, right? I think I think what happens is some of these SEC teams, it's basically a mix of good schedule, good players, good coaches, good coordinators. It generates this. Oh, we get a 10-2 or a 9-3 season. We get a really good season. On one of the lower tier schools, Arkansas, Missouri, we get a really good year on something, and then you think that's going to translate to the next year, and then it just never does. And it's like we massively overperformed, and actually you see that the luck metric 1.5 there, right? Now again, this schedule is actually pretty easy. You only really have Alabama. You have Alabama. You have really really only Alabama. Jeez, you have maybe Texas A&M. But that's it. It is a really easy schedule, but it seems like a no-brainer. But you wonder if this is a team that maybe peaked a little too early, right? If this is a team that they had a really good year because their quarterback was having a good year, because their coordinators were both having a good year, because it was a good team, you worry that, okay, maybe that was their year. And okay, yep, they went off, they beat a depleted Ohio State that a bunch of people went to the NFL and their quarterback transferred. They beat them in the Sugar, no, the what bowl? The Fiesta
Cotton.
Bowl, one of the bowls.
Cotton.
Cotton Bowl, thank you. One of the bowls. It doesn't matter now which one, but basically, yeah, they beat them in a New Year's Six bowl, and maybe that was their year. That was their year to be good, and now people are extrapolating that out to the next year, saying, oh, they're only going to get better this year, but maybe that was their year.
Yeah, I'm looking last year too. Their only losses were LSU and Georgia. Maybe they fit like your description of like, all right, you get their wins and their losses. They just make sense. Did they actually give Georgia their toughest game?
Yeah.
Okay, until Georgia actually lost to Alabama. I kind of remember
Auburn
that
gave Georgia a tough test too. So Auburn
Oh my
and
god.
Missouri.
Okay.
So
All right. Then unhear that remark. I'm not a fan of Auburn. We'll get to there in a moment. Yeah, Yeah, I can see Brendan's point about being better than or not being as good as their record. But yeah, that under, Jesus, man, just going. That's going to be like probably if it's DraftKings like plus 130 or 140 to go over 9.5. That's not the worst bet in the world. I'll tell you that. And it's not like the two games where they're dogs. Like they're not winnable. I don't see any game on here that's not winnable at all. Apparently, Texas A&M is now the Green Bay Packers or the Chiefs since they're only giving 3 to Texas.
Missouri over 9.5 plus 140 on Bet365 just now.
Wow. All right. I might actually. Yeah. I don't know. I have to think about that one. That might be a play.
It just seems like a trap.
Yeah, that's possible. All right, Tennessee. I think I like this team better than most. Although I look at skipping ahead to the bottom, I see the over taking a lot of action here, so maybe not. Fourth season under Heupel, he's got a good record here. What's really interesting is basically you think of Tennessee, you think, all right, these guys probably air it out 9 out of every 10 plays. They actually pass 53% of the time. They're actually 64th, like right in the middle in terms of their run pass splits and how they call plays, which is interesting considering every highlight of them is just basically throwing it way downfield to some wide open guy over some hopelessly confused safety. Nico, we'll just call him that for now, replaces Joe Milton. As we said going into last season, I said, look, Joe Milton is a nice quarterback and he'll be a nice quarterback, but he's not going to be Hendon Hooker and everybody else. Not everybody else. A lot of people got carried away, including the guy who said Oregon's going to go 6-6 every year in the Big Ten. I think this is a huge upgrade that people are missing. God bless Joe Milton. You had a nice college career. I'm sure you had a lot of fun, but I think Nico, maybe not in game 1 or 2. I think by the middle of the season, he's going to be an upgrade. Milton's not really fleet of foot, not the best decision maker. I don't know if he's good on the short stuff. He's got a cannon of an arm. So I like a lot of that. They have an experienced offensive line. They returned most of the receiving yards. They added quite a bit in the portal. The defense is really inexperienced. Apparently, they lost a lot of guys to the portal. They've got this crazy schedule break here where they have no road games for, what is that, like 5 or 6 weeks? My goodness, it's nuts. My hot take here is I think they're going to finish with a higher power rating than Ole Miss. I think there's a little more upside on the offense. And Tim Banks more than Fred Golding as a defensive coordinator. I haven't seen them get a lot of preseason buzz. It just seems like the buzz that I would expect here has been more at Missouri. We just talked about them. That might be a scheduling issue, but I think the team's going to be really good. They're not going to win the SEC. I could see them sneaking into the playoff, though, if things fall right. You're nodding, so I'll let you. You agree with me on that, Robert?
Yeah, I actually really like this team. I can, again, this is a team where I can see something along the lines of lose to Georgia, lose to Bama, miss out on the SEC championship game, but you're like seventh or eighth seed in the college, or maybe 10th seed in the college football playoff, right? That's, I see that. One thing is you note apex there for Nico Lamaleva.
Iamala.
We're gonna work on that. But no, honestly, and here's the thing: he annihilated Iowa's defense in the bowl game. I was not expecting that. I was like 100%. This is Kirk Ferentz. They're gonna go out there, win a bowl game, grind it out against an inexperienced Tennessee quarterback. You're setting him out his first game against Iowa's defense. Wow, what a good draw for him there. And then he shreds them. What was the score here? It was 35-0. I think that's probably, well, actually no. Okay, technically they lost to Michigan and Ohio State the last couple of years, but that's basically tied for their worst loss. That's insane. You just absolutely annihilate one of the best defenses in the game in your first start. I know you have Apex here. You should do adjusted Apex. What's that? Adjusted Apex? What,
Yeah.
150, something like that? That would put him right up there with one of the top quarterbacks in the league if you adjust that for Iowa's defense. Now again, we're not doing that 'cause it's one game sample, but again, this team could be really good on offense. And again, Josh Heupel, it's his fourth year here. This team was middling at best before he came here. 7-6 first year, 11-2 second year, and then 10-4. Bit of a regression, but that's because you lost 10 in Hooker. So 9-4 then in the next year. But 9-4 in the SEC still good. That's good. That's a good number too. That's not okay. We fell off a cliff and went like 4-4-8. You were like, we're still good. Not we're rebuilding, but that's still good. Now you've got a quarterback and he's got another entire. It was basically his first game. He's got an entire off season now. Gets to warm up for 3 straight weeks. Probably throw for, I don't know, a couple thousand yards in the first 3 weeks there. Probably like 8 touchdowns or so. And then you play against Oklahoma, not bad, but not the worst team. Arkansas again. You get to warm up. You get to Alabama. You could definitely take down Alabama, and then you're looking at something like a short dog at Georgia. And then you're like, this team could be like only one loss, and they could be going to the SEC championship game here, right? No, I really like this team, and I think you're getting this team at about 2-1 to make the college football playoff. I absolutely love that bet. I love them at 2-1 to make the college football playoff.
Great point about Iowa. I think if I remember, their defensive apex was like in the 50s or maybe high 40s. So yeah, if you adjust that out, that reflects really favorably. The question here to me is the defense, Brendan. Do you see that biting them in the butt this year? Or can they overcome that?
I think it's going to be their weakness for sure. Last year, I thought the defense improved a little bit from that really good 2022 team, but again, it's a little bit of inexperience this year. Had to go in the portal a little bit, probably not as much as I thought that they should have, but they got James Pierce, who's a game changer defensively. So how much can he really carry that defense? How much is his impact going to be? That's a question I have. We know he's going to be good, but how much will he impact the game really? But offensively, I think quarterback's upgraded. We've talked about that, but I think the wide receiver room's not being talked about enough nationally. I think Chris Brazzell was a really good portal pickup. They got Brew McCoy there, Squirrel White there. So I think Nico's got some weapons he can use. Offensive line, I think, is solid. Cooper Mays there at center. But yeah, to me, this is going to be one of the more exciting teams to watch this season because I think the offense has so much potential. Now, there's still a lot of question marks. Nico, he hasn't started the bowl game, but hasn't started that full season yet. So, like we have a feeling it's going to be really good, but we don't know for sure. There's still a little bit of question there. Schedule, I do think certain aspects work out pretty favorably for them, like those home games right there in the middle of the season. You get Alabama at home. Georgia game's going to be tough. But to me, how I see it is I kind of see this team on the outside looking in of the college football playoff. I see it as a 9-3 team. Again, questions defensively. I see them as a 9-3 type team. Not a bad team, but not a great team. But I would not be shocked whatsoever if they happen to sneak into that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, interesting. I'd look at playing that over, but laying 170 doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. All right, we have a storyboard here. This is just sad. So, Robert, we weren't the very first, but we were very early on Mike Elko at Duke, just saying, all right, this guy's got it. He's got it together. We've been big fans, and that might be coming to an end because he's at Texas A&M now. And if you don't know about Texas A&M or like all their weird stuff, I've literally went through this whole progression here. All right, Elko, if you just look at one of the things I like to look on YouTube is like pregame, what do I want to say, routines or whatever, traditions. And A&M's is really cool. You can make out in here, you've got these guys in military garb. They're playing drums. It sounds like war is what it sounds like. And you can see it's a packed house. It's an awesome atmosphere just to see. And then the team comes out on the field and then they start singing their stupid song. You can see half their song is about the University of Texas, literally about the University of Texas song. Your song is about another song. And then right after that, they have another song that's literally, if you don't know, Varsity was actually the predecessor. This is the history part of the podcast here. You might know Bevo now, the Longhorn. So before Bevo, the Longhorn's name was Varsity. So they have a whole little song about sawing his horns off. So you're obsessed with your rival and you're promoting animal cruelty. I don't know if either of you know this story about this little screen grab right here. Does that, any idea about this? This is great. You have to look it up. So apparently when they played on artificial turf, SMU's cheerleaders ran onto the field. And this guy, actually an A&M guy in his full military gear, brandished a saber just to get these guys out. As a result of this, they actually changed the rule. Now they can only have pretend sabers for games because this guy couldn't control himself.
Why would they give them real swords in the first place?
It was the 80s. Everything went. This is, I think you could still drive drunk. It was a different time, folks. Then you have this. Are you guys familiar with this yell practice thing where these guys wear these horrible overalls and they tell the corniest jokes about the one book in somebody's library burned and the other one was overdue, or just, it's horrible, just corny, stupid jokes. It's weird. Then you've got like these guys, you don't have to be in the military, you can volunteer, but I guess if you're in the military part of, or you're a cadet there, one of their traditions is if you're a guy, is like crushing your own genitals to share in the pain that the football team is playing. Enjoy that. I don't do that at the Coliseum. I can tell you that. I haven't been there for a while, but that's not my cup of tea. And then they've got these cheerleaders who are like, I guess they're like Pat Boone dressed up in his ice cream man gear, leading cheers, literally like with this thing. It's just, I think as a podcast, we're breaking up with Mike Elko. So that's the background here. Okay, Mike Elko, was nice knowing you. We loved you with Duke, and I guess I'll just be neutral. I can't be against the guy.
Don't group me into that. I'm still all in on Elko.
Okay. I love Jay Bateman as a defensive coordinator. That's a brilliant hire. He was so good and underrated at Army. I don't know about the Colin Klein hire. You look at his experience, it's Kansas State on top of Kansas State with a side order of Kansas State. I don't know how that translates to the SEC. Connor Wegman had a really nice season last season, but he had the world's greatest scumbag as his offensive coordinator. I don't know if we can repeat that self now that Bobby Petrino is elsewhere. Experienced offensive line, it's good enough there. Defense is a little bit inexperienced, but I think Elko is just a genius enough to fix that. So many questions about this team. I'm still just like hearing white noise from being punched in the face about they're only giving 3 to Texas. If you guys are interested in that, you can just get away from your book and call me directly. We can take the 10% vig out of that because I'm happy to give 3 with the Longhorns there. Just a lot of questions to me. Just the one thing I'm most interested in is Colin Klein. Just, Kansas State gets drop shipped in the SEC. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. The most I hold myself to is just podcast, and Robert's a very forgiving co-host. Brendan, maybe you had to dig deeper on this team. Do you have any more definitive opinions than I do on this?
I think Mike Elko was arguably, the best head coaching hire of this offseason. I'm really high on Elko. I think he's going to turn this Texas A&M program around. And look, he didn't inherit like a totally dysfunctional in terms of talent team, right? There's talent there.
Exactly.
So, and he added guys from the transfer portal, so there is talent there. They're ready to have a winning season. It's not like he's got to rebuild it from a 3-9, 4-8 team like some other places. So there's talent there, but he's got to sort out some of the CEO situation type of things, which I think he's capable of doing. But yeah, I think Elko, I think that's an instant improvement at the head coaching spot. But yeah, I do have questions. I think Wegman's a good quarterback. The schedule to me, I think it's manageable. There are some tough games, and I'm seeing that 8.5. I think it's a little too lofty, especially considering it's a little bit juiced to the over at -120 there, because there's plenty of losable games there. Notre Dame at Florida's not easy. You get Missouri at home, you get LSU at home, you get Texas at home. But also, I don't see Alabama there. I don't see Georgia on that schedule. So they do miss some of those top teams. But again, like I said, there's definitely I can see 5-6 losses on there as well. But yeah, to me, this is this is kind of a mystery team to me. I'm not going to put super high expectations. There's some talent there. I like Nick Scoreton on the defensive line, defensively there. Some of those receivers I like Moose Muhammad, who's veteran at A&M. So yeah, there's talent. It's hard to put a number on this team, how many games they're going to win. If I were to guess right now, I think 7 to 8 would be reasonable in my eyes and how I see it, how the schedule looks and how much talent they have. But again, I'm not going to sit here and hold them accountable for my expectations because I don't truly know with this team.
Yeah. I'm so glad because I'd forgotten about this. You just reminded me. I agree that this is probably the best hire. Noted Big Ten expert, Stu Mandel, who has Oregon going 6-6 every year in the Big Ten. Sorry, Robert. He gave the hire a C+ because they tried to hire Mark Stoops and they didn't get him, so they had to settle on Mike Elko, which is
Elko's better. I think Elko's better.
It's not even close. It's not even close. And by the way, he gave Deshaun Foster's hiring UCLA a higher grade than this because that's the guy that they first went after. So, Stu Mandel, I would like to book your action in any day of the week. I'll just keep it at that. Robert, are you joining me at the funeral for our relationship for Mike and love for Mike Elko here?
I would say that friends don't let friends coach at Texas A&M. So
we failed him.
Friendship. We failed him, yes, and that might mean the end of our friendship. But again, still a good coach, and again, we don't discriminate. If we see value on Texas A&M and Mike Elko, we'll be betting that. Fun fact: you had talked about the weird when they're all staying there in overalls and they're doing the jokes about the other team. Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, what's it called? The shout line or something?
It's yell practice.
Yell practice. Yeah. So I saw the video of it, and when you were mentioning it, I'm like, oh, I remember that. I saw it because I remember seeing people posted it on Twitter after one of Texas A&M's humiliating losses. And I was looking, I'm like, which humiliating loss was that? And there's a lot of them over the last couple of years. Yes. So I had to look. It was App State. It was when they lost 17-14 to App State, and that's how I know about the yell practice or whatever it is. Because I remember they were making fun of App State, and then they lost as 18-point favorites, which was embarrassing. No, I think this team is going to be okay. Elko is good. He basically built up a Duke program from nothing. I feel so bad for Duke. They're like, we're a football school now. And they're like, nope. No, it's Elko over Mark Stoops is 1,000% better. That's a way better pick. I think there is a little bit of misplaced hype this year for A&M, at least right now. Notre Dame, basically a pick. I think they're a 1-point dog to Notre Dame. That's a bit much. Again, this team will be good, but I just don't think they're going to be good this year. I think give Mike Elko a year or two to build this up, and then, yeah, this team will be really good. But you're still in the SEC, right? I think he did a really good job of building up in the ACC, but again, that takes a lot less time than building up a team that's competing with the top teams, right? You don't have to play Georgia in the ACC. You don't have to play the other schools in the ACC as well, right? You've got Notre Dame on your schedule for some reason. Again, no idea why they're playing Notre Dame. Then you have Florida, LSU, Texas again. Now, Texas, though, the reason why that line is short is that it's a rivalry game. That is obviously one of the biggest rivalries in all of college sports. It's back this year for the first time. I think Texas A&M won it the last time, if I remember correctly, back in 2011, I want to say it was. And now it's back. That's going to be interesting. That's why you do it. But yeah, it is very weird for a school to have like their entire songs based off of another team's mascot, and especially a dead mascot. That is very weird. But no, this team will be good, just not this year. Thank God we've moved on from the last coach here. But no, not this year for this team. But given another year or two, this team will be. I'll be having this team as one of my top teams in the SEC probably. Yeah.
Okay. Oklahoma. This is an interesting team. Just third season under Venables. He had a rough first season. Last season actually was, I think I think they're overlooked for pretty much the whole season. I don't like the change in OC. Jeff Lebby left, so you have to get a new one. Seth Luttrell, I need to be convinced of him as an OC. His North Texas teams basically they had good offenses with Graham Harrell and then one random Austin Aune season. The whole Jackson Arnold thing just mystifies me. You had Dylan Gabriel, who's just like shredding offenses, and they're like, yeah, you know what? You're not going to start next year. We're going to go with this Arnold kid. That's how I understood that thing shook out, where he was in the portal. And I don't think anybody is ever going to accuse Oklahoma fans of being overly rational, but Sooner Twitter was like just a little too happy to see Gabriel go. I don't know. There might be some weird things in that fan base. They retain basically all their receiving talent. This is a big concern. It's not just the inexperienced line. They return 4 starts from this team. They have 3 experienced transfers that are expected to start. Shout out to this guy, Hythlow Day. I think that's his Twitter handle. You'll appreciate Robert. He's a Ducks fan. He did a big study, and basically there's a big breaking point. If you bring in 2 starters, or you bring in 2 transfers to start on your O-line, it's okay. That third one is a breaking point. You're just losing too much continuity. I saw that firsthand with my USC Trojans last season. It makes sense. So this is a red flag to me. I understand when you do it, because if you're looking at basically having somebody you don't believe in or a transfer that's proven, the temptation is there, but it's a tough move. Venables took a year to improve the offense later than I expected, 17th in FBS. So I think their defense, they're at the point now. He recruits at a high level. I think their defense is just going to be good every year, and some seasons just like a real bear. They're like Texas. Their second road game isn't until October 26th, which is crazy. Here's the difference. This is what's crazy. Same math for Texas as Oklahoma. They get the short end of the scheduling stick, it looks like. They're facing a totally different caliber of team this season than what they faced last season. This is what scares me about this team. I think that's why this number is so low. I think they're the one. Everybody says, oh, wait, Texas is going to get culture shock because they're the bigger target of the two. But I think these are the guys that are really going to feel it in terms of going to the SEC. I'm not betting this at all. With new quarterback, new OC, that's a question. The offensive line, there's just a lot of red flags here. I'm probably more bullish on Venables than most people outside of Norman, but this is going to probably test their patience a little bit. But hey, Robert, it landed you guys Dylan Gabriel, so congratulations on that. Are you think that they're going to regret that move?
I think so. Jackson Arnold could still be good, but this team is definitely not the same team it was before. Oh my God, what's the name of the USC coach? Name's escaping me right now. Lincoln Riley. This is not the same team that was under Lincoln Riley. This team is offense. It was good, but still not Lincoln Riley levels. Defense improved, but again, you need a lot more than a lot better improvement to make up for the loss of offensive firepower there, right? And again, this is what we were talking about with Texas in terms of the mean and median opponent rating, right? That's almost triple mean opponent rating ish, a little bit less than triple, more than 1.5 times. Median is like 6x, right? So this is, and again, Oklahoma, not a team that went 10-3 last year. I think they lost their bowl game. Yeah, they did lose their bowl game to Arizona. But again, they lost Oklahoma State. They lost to Kansas. They beat UCF by 3. They beat BYU by 7, right? BYU, not a good team last year. Guess what? Instead of BYU, now you get to play Missouri, right? UCF, not even, actually no, UCF was a Big 12 team last year, but just barely. They were also not a good team. Now instead of them, now you get South Carolina. Now you have Ole Miss, right? This is the thing. You still get to play Texas, which was your toughest game all last year. But instead of Oklahoma State, which you lost to by 3, now instead of Oklahoma State, now you're playing Alabama or LSU. So have fun. Have fun with that. Not out of their own possibility this team doesn't make a bowl. Straight up. This could be like the 5-7 year. Jackson Arnold could be the bright spot in this team, but just look at this schedule. Tennessee, Texas, Missouri, Alabama, LSU. That's 5 teams right there that we think are good. And that's actually, I missed Mississippi. That's 6 teams, right? They're 6-6, right? And then not only that, but you have Houston in there as well. Tulane, not a bad team. And South Carolina, Auburn, these are teams that can theoretically surprise you. So, yeah, this team, I think this team could not make a bowl. That's the level of how I think this year is going to go for them.
I just, man, that schedule it's literally about as tough as you can get without facing Georgia. But Brendan, I got this team was not so far from being really good last season, and just this is just a lot of unfortunate circumstances. New OC, new quarterback. I don't like the offensive line situation. Do you? Is this like you've characterized the other side of this? But is this one where just like they're not going to be nearly as bad as their record?
That's exactly right. That's exactly how I view this team. There's one major question mark with the position group, and that's the O-line, because you guys addressed it, transfers, lack of returning starters. I think this is the most talented team Venables has had at Oklahoma. But again, look at the schedule. This is absolutely brutal. So over-under win total kind of tells the story there, 7.5, but it's a talented team. So to me, this team is going to be better than what their record is. It's pretty much as simple as that.
Yeah, to that point, I could see them being dogs in a lot of games, but this seems like the team. Maybe just later in the season, like they're just gonna have maybe just a rough record, and it's like, all right, I wouldn't be surprised if they win into their last three, or even two of them as touchdown plus dogs. Yeah, this will be interesting. I still think Venables is the right guy for that program. It's just a lot of unfortunate circumstances just combining here all in one season. Speaking of unfortunate, it's the Auburn Tigers. I'm so out on this team. And I just, it's the quarterback play. I'm not going to waste everybody. We'll just skip ahead a little bit. If you replace both your offensive and defensive coordinator after year one, not a great sign, as Robert would say. Only 4 defenses were worse than the entire conference. This just kills you. This kills you. I don't know if you're fond of Peyton Thorne because of all the great memories he gave you. Michigan State, you're probably sneakily laughing like, oh, this is that weird guy that, now he's dating this girl that I don't like. All right. Awesome.
Yeah, Michigan State fans, their relationship with Peyton Thorne's interesting because it's like, all right, thank you. You were the quarterback of that excellent 2021 team that won 11 games, but also Peyton Thorne's just not a great quarterback, right? And then Auburn fans, I saw a lot of Auburn fans really excited when they landed him. Oregon, Michigan State's all-time leader in, I think, passing touchdowns, I think was the stat. And it's like, yeah, he just had really good receivers to throw to, and it was just a magical year for Michigan State that season. And then did what I expected him to do at Auburn, which is, yeah, he's an average quarterback. He's not a great passer. He's decent with his legs, but you're just going to get what you're going to get with him.
Yeah. To that point, I'm sure just going to the SEC defenses was not a lot of fun. The 71 apex is rough. A 71 apex in career starts 26-37 means I'm so far out on you. I cannot express how far I am out on you. And I keep on harping on this because look at the apex of the returning starters on these other teams. You are starting at such a deficit against all these teams. Just at the most important position, you are starting way behind. When in our futures pod, I said I like him under 7.5. I love him. I can't see him being favored in more than 5 games this season. I'm so out on this team. I think the market is just, there's a lot of Hugh Freeze, Mississippi season fairy dust in this number right here. I'm so out on him. I think 5 is probably the upper limit for him. Am I just being mean, Brendan?
I'm not as harsh against them. I don't think they're going to win 8-9 games. I don't think they're hitting that over, but I think that there is some Hugh Freeze magic when he does play some of those top teams. Like you look at last year, they were competitive against Georgia, competitive against Ole Miss, competitive right down to the wire against Alabama. So I would not be shocked to see Hugh Freeze just come up with a magical game plan. Team plays really well for one game and they come up with a big upset. So to me, Auburn is like the ultimate spoiler of the SEC because they play a lot of the top teams. Look at that schedule. Georgia, Missouri, Texas A&M, Alabama, Oklahoma, all teams that could contend for an SEC championship or playoff spot. So Auburn, to me, is the ultimate spoiler team in the SEC. I think a bowl game would be good for this team. Now, I don't think they'll be significantly better than last year. I think they'll be slightly better. So I think a bowl game is a reasonable expectation. And yeah, back on the Peyton Thorne thing, Freeze knows that, yeah, he doesn't have the quarterback talent needed to compete at the next level or compete for an SEC championship. He doesn't have that quarterback talent on campus yet. So yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer for Freeze to get Auburn to a competitive level. But like I said, I think this team has the capability of playing spoiler. And they do have some playmakers on this team, like Cam Coleman's going to be an excellent true freshman. I like Jarquez Hunter at running back. So they do have some playmakers. But like I said, I think they're going to pull a big upset this year.
So where do you think, before I throw it to Robert, where do you think they improve more? What's their identity? Are they more of an offensive team or a defensive team? I don't see, there's nothing in here to say, oh, big improvement metric or anything. You know the roster's better than I do. If you just say they're going to be better this season because of X, what is X?
I think it's depth defensively is the main thing. I don't think they upgraded significantly at with the ones, but I think they got a lot of transfers in with the twos defensively, so I think defensive depth will improve. I think wide receivers will improve significantly just with the addition of a guy like Cam Coleman. He's instantly going to be the best receiver on that team. Keandre Lambert-Smith is another transfer there from Penn State, so I think they're improved at receiver, improved defensive depth. But yeah, I think the running game will be decent like it was last year, so yeah, I expect them to lean on that run game, and wide receivers will be better. So I do think offensively they'll be a little bit better. Defensively, depth-wise, I think they'll be a little bit better as well.
Robert, I remember when I made the case for this in the Futures Pod, I think Jackson was not as, our guest was not as thrilled about my take on this. I don't remember your response. Now you've heard the same sermon twice. Have I converted you to the church of under here?
Yeah, I do like this under. It's down to minus 150. But I don't like, even if you get a random upset or two, fine, let's say they beat Georgia somehow, miracle, right? They beat Georgia. Okay, cool. You still have Missouri. You still have Texas A&M. You still have Alabama. You still have a bunch of other teams. Oklahoma's going to be desperate for a win in there. Kentucky as well. You've got a lot of teams that are going to need that. You don't really have a lot of easy schedules where I can say definitively, oh yeah, Auburn is better than that team. I can't. Okay, obviously they're better than Alabama A&M. I'll give them that, and better than Cal and New Mexico and ULM. Maybe Arkansas. That's iffy though. But again, outside of the non-conference games, I can't definitively say they're better than any of these other teams. Straight
I'll
up.
say they're better than Vanderbilt. I'll give them that. I know that we love
Oh,
Diego
okay,
Hart.
fine. Yeah, okay, Vanderbilt. Sorry, I missed them in there. But yeah, they're okay. They're better than Vanderbilt. But okay, that's not saying much. There's your 5 wins, right? Now, can they pull off an upset here or there? Sure, okay. I think Auburn hired Hugh Freeze because they're like, he's beaten Saban before. We need someone who can beat Nick Saban. Because obviously they thought that the path to being a good team in college football is beating Nick Saban. Because that's what Gus Malzahn was able to do every other year. So they're like, we need someone who can beat Nick Saban. Then Nick Saban retired. So that kind of defeats the purpose of the case, right? If you're like, we need to beat Nick Saban, but then Nick Saban's gone, then what'd you hire this guy for? Because beating Nick Saban was never really his problem. It was winning the other games. Because if you beat Nick Saban and then lose a bunch of other games, it doesn't matter that you beat Nick Saban. You're still not going to the SEC championship game. I don't think Hugh Freeze is a well enough rounded coach. I think honestly, I think he's just. I would say that yeah, okay, they can pull off an upset and getting maximum effort against some of the top teams in the country, especially against Texas A&M or Bama or Georgia. That's great. But it's when you play other teams. What happens when you play Missouri? You're getting your team up for that game. Are you getting your team up for the other games? They do not have a consistent track record of doing that. And I don't see this team really improving, right? Peyton Thorne, I would have liked to have seen them move on from Peyton Thorne. There was definitely a lot better options available in the transfer portal. That's supposed to be what you guys are doing now. You're spending all this money on. You're supposed to be spending this money on NIL. Now I guess you're still paying off the. I think you're still paying off the last guy's debt, so that's fine. But if you're spending the money to compete, why are you riding with Peyton Thorne? You can't find a single better Kyle McCord, right? There were so many better at Syracuse. You're telling me you can't beat Syracuse's offer? There was better players available here. I don't know why you couldn't get one of them.
Yeah, an SEC team. It's just it's weird. It's not to always make it about USC, but USC's backup is better than their starter, Jaden Mayava. I don't know how you're an SEC program and you land here for 2 years in a row. I don't know. On the other hand, it's Auburn, and boy, if there's any school who's like more dysfunctional consistently than like my school's athletic department, it is absolutely them. It is chaos on top of chaos to the square of chaos. All right, we seem to be like-minded here. Brendan is a little more bullish, but even then, a stretch to see that 8th win here. Oh, Robert, I gotta say, look at this. Graham Mertz from a 77 apex to a 122 in one season under your guy Billy Napier. And it wasn't like they just ran the ball and gave him easy setups. They were eighth in yards per rush in the SEC. Very average. Harkening back to, oh yeah, this guy was highly recruited at Wisconsin. Maybe there's a little something there. They retain a lot of their receiving yards. Offense was okay for how disappointing the season was. Now and why I'm like sneakily okay with that is Napier's a former offensive coordinator. It's not like his side of the ball fell apart here. Now, I think completely overlooked in just how bad my Trojans defense was just this. This is way worse than the USC somehow. I missed this entirely, maybe I was just like trying to be nice to you and I blocked it out since. Um, what's tough here is just the numbers are just horrible against the pass and the run. They had a low improvement metric after or going into the 23 season. And now they have a low improvement metric, it's like average again. There should have been a lot of guys going up the learning curve. This tells me that they had probably a lot of guys on defense that just didn't work out. And they said, okay, play this year, but you're not going to start again. It's not working out, which almost seems like they're in year one on defense. I guess I'm a little more confident after I did this build up here that the offense is sneakily competent plus. Defense needs to be fixed. But this schedule, man, where is there a breather? Where do you have 2 weeks off? I don't see it. We were talking about some of their schedules. This might be the worst. It's just the SEC office might just hate the Florida Gators. This could be just as Brandon's framing things. I think this team's not as bad as their schedule is going to say. I think they're better than their schedule. Man, the schedule, again, it's just as tough as it gets. I think they have the toughest schedule.
I think in college football, I think, yeah.
Yeah, it has to be. So, Robert, as the Gators guy here, I don't even know where to go with this schedule, just like location and location in real estate. That's what this whole thing is about, right?
Yeah, I will say that there is even the first five aren't bad, but they're definitely winnable, right? If you beat Miami, you should. If you beat Miami in week one, you have a half decent chance of starting the year 5-0. So cool, okay. Then you actually cash the over then, but I actually bet it over 5.5, right? Okay, but you're still looking to try to get to a bowl, right? Then your next seven are where it gets into where there's problems, right? Tennessee, not great. Kentucky at home, okay. Maybe you could pull off a win there. Maybe that's your sixth win, okay. Versus Georgia, not great, but sometimes Florida does pull the upset there, but probably unlikely. At Texas, hey, maybe that's something. Maybe that Texas isn't looking good there. LSU, I don't like that. They always find weird ways to lose that game. Ole Miss, maybe you could do something with Ole Miss. I don't know. And then at Florida State, maybe Florida State's not having a good year. Again, you're really trying to shoehorn in that sixth win, and it's very difficult to even just get to a bowl game, let alone anything. One thing I will say, though, is that the market prices this team in as like a middle team. And I think, and you've alluded to it a little bit, their offense is a very good offense. It's probably one of the better offenses in the SEC, but their defense is horrible. So when you average those out, you get here, right? But it's not actually one team that's at this level. It's actually two teams, one good team and one horrible team. And if you can just make the horrible team less horrible, then that raises your average a lot, right? And that's the thing. I think the way Florida gets through this, again, assuming this isn't Billy Napier's last games in Florida, which to be fair, it definitely could be. I'm not ruling that out. But the way you get there is you say, okay, if this team improves on defense and the offense maybe regresses a little bit, but not that much, because it is still the same quarterback and a lot of the same players. But they did lose Ricky Pearsall first round of the draft, and they lost their running back to, I believe it was Georgia. So this team did lose a little on offense, but they do keep their quarterback. If you do that, and you basically say this team is good, and you say, okay, maybe Kentucky's not having a good year, maybe A&M and Miami and the other ones aren't having a good year, and you just say they're just better than those teams. Because obviously right now we're trying to figure out where teams are, but if they are just better, then yeah, you can get to your sixth, maybe even a seventh win if you upset Ole Miss or something, right? And then this team goes to a half decent bowl, but again, the defense is going to hold them back. there are huge problems on defense. There have been problems on defense even back even going back a few years when they had that amazing, I think it was 2020 season, right? Yeah, when they almost, oh no, sorry, the 2019 season where they had Kyle Trask and they basically almost made the college football playoff, right? Even going back then, they've had a bad defense since then, and it has not gotten better. It is arguably, it's hard. It's been always just bad, but it's not. It's not improved. It has been worse and worse and worse, and it's still hurting them. And if you can somehow figure it out and actually play defense, maybe you can actually do something. But again, like it's funny, right? Because we thought last year it was going to be we thought it was going to be Graham Mertz. We thought Graham Mertz was going to be the problem. We were like, okay, the defense will improve because they hired the one good defensive coordinator. I believe he was from Southern Miss, I believe.
Yeah,
So we're like,
yeah.
we're gonna be good. We're gonna have that, and it's gonna be Graham Mertz. It's gonna hurt, but then Graham Mertz looked pretty good. 122 apex, considering the fact of where he was coming from, Wisconsin, just massively overperforming. And I think we said it in the season finale last year. Graham Mertz had 3 interceptions last year. And if you had said Graham Mertz is going to have 3 interceptions, I would have said, which game was that, right? And I think exactly, right? And that's the thing, right? That was the expectation for Graham Mertz, and he massively overperformed expectations. So this is the thing. They could do it again, but that defense has got to get better. If that defense does not get better, then that over 4 is going to be really hard to hit. If this defense doesn't improve, then you get a loss there to Texas A&M.
Yeah, I agree. So, Brendan, a couple times you've made a reference to if Florida still has a coach by then. Now that I take a closer look at this schedule, now I get with their defensive challenges in this schedule, it seems like a tough path. Fair?
Oh, absolutely. This is 100% the toughest schedule in the country. It's honestly, it might be the toughest schedule I've ever seen, like in my time watching college football. This is this tough. I mean, you start right away with Miami. The only cupcake game is Samford in week 2. And then you're getting A&M, and then Mississippi State's not an easy place to play. So yeah, to me, they got to start off really well and win like at least probably 4 of those first 5 games. If they want to make a bowl game, hit that over at the very least. So yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse with them, but I think this team is going to be better than what their record says. Like this team legitimately could be the quality of a top 25 team, but be like 6-6. As you look at the schedule, like Miami could be a top 20. They are a preseason top 25 team. Ditto with A&M. Ditto with Tennessee. Ditto with Georgia, Texas, LSU, Florida State, Mississippi. Like they literally could miss a bowl game and theoretically be one of the 25 best teams in the country. So that's how I view Florida. Like if the record's not good enough and Napier gets fired, it is what it is. Maybe he didn't get a fair shake this year, but at Florida, you got to get results. They got to embrace the schedule, and we'll see what happens. But my hopes are not too high with this team based on this schedule.
Yeah. By the way, do you think that Central Florida will be up for that game too? My God.
Oh, absolutely. They're going to be motivated because they've been like the little brother of the state of Florida for a long time.
They've been pushing for that game for years and years, and now they finally get it. And I don't know if they did a 2-1 or if they just are. I think they did 2 at Florida and 1 at a neutral site, right?
I'm not 100% sure, but it's definitely not a home and home. It's either 2-1 or like a 1-1-1. Not 100% sure though.
So this is a tough one. Sorry, Robert. That and your Ducks are going 6-6 in the Pac or the Big Ten, according to noted Big Ten expert Stuart Mandel. Okay, I might be a little optimistic on this one. Just to make this quick, I said before last season, I said Danny is going to murder this offense, and he actually murdered KJ Jefferson's SEC career. You get a new OC who's proven not a great guy, but an awesome offensive coordinator. I love the new quarterback, Taylor Green. I refer to him here as a refugee from the oppressive offensive regime of Bush Hamden. We'll get to him a little bit later. They actually came out like a net winner through the portal. They added more yards than they lost of Ryan, so they have 121% of their Ryan from last season. The offensive line got cleaned out, but Pittman is an O-line coach, so I think if there's one position where you can afford to rebuild and not have it absolutely crush you, this would be the spot for this team. Didn't know this. Travis Williams made a big impact year 1 as the new defensive coordinator there, replacing Barry Odom. So I like that. I remember that they were really bad, Odom's last season on defense. Another unkind schedule, which is, I don't know, some of these teams just got crushed here. If you go by the top 8 teams based on the futures, they catch 6 of them. They missed Georgia. That's one of the 2, but it's the rest of the top 8. This is not an easy schedule here at all. Season total 4.5. The over is getting a little bit of play. I think I still need to be. I like this. I guess the offensive line. If I go back to last year, Steve Adazio was horrible at A&M, and Wegman had good numbers there. So I think probably between Petrino and Pittman, they can probably figure a way around that. I'd like this improvement in year 1 to the new DC. I'm not going to bet it, but if I was going to play them, I would play the over here. I think they're a team that can, as you, Brendan, see Auburn is capable of pulling off an upset. I think that this team can pull up 1 or 2, seemingly from out of nowhere. You've got the pieces of the OC and the quarterback as a starting point. Am I too optimistic here?
No, I think there's definitely pieces to like. I like Taylon Green. I like the kind of the new coaching staff that Pittman has, but this is really a prove it year for Sam Pittman because was not good last year. He had a really good, I think it was a 2021 season. He did really well, but yeah, to me, this is a prove it year for Sam Pittman, and he's got one of the toughest schedules in the country, just like Florida has one of the toughest schedules in the country. So to me, I think this team, like I said with Florida, I think this team's going to be better than what their record says because you see it right there. It plays 6 of the top 8 in the SEC. To me, I lean towards that over with that 4.5, but I don't think it's like a for sure lock because I see him being favored in probably only 4 games, like Arkansas Pine Bluff, UAB, Louisiana Tech, and probably at Mississippi State. I think they're the better team there. But there's other winnable games on the schedule. At Auburn's winnable. Yeah, but really not much else than that. I think this team improves record-wise. I think they go 5-7. They pull an upset, maybe 6-6, and get to a bowl game. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting team to watch offensively, but my hopes aren't super high with Arkansas. I do think they'll probably hit that over, though.
Okay. Robert, are you on the Razorback train here?
I mean, the over-under 4, and again, when you look at some of these season bets, over-under 4.5 is not horrible here, right? You've got Arkansas Pine Bluff, cool. Oklahoma State, UAB, and Louisiana Tech. That's far from terrifying. That's pretty good wins there, right? Then you need to find another win somewhere. You've got at Auburn. That could be a winnable game. Home to Texas A&M. That could be a winnable game. At Mississippi State, a very winnable game. You could maybe upset Missouri, maybe. But like, I don't think Oklahoma State is particularly tough. I think you could definitely beat Oklahoma State, right? If you win those 4 non-conference games, all you need to do is pick off one SEC team, of which Mississippi State is an eminently winnable game, and then all of a sudden, poof, there's your over, and you hit your over basically even money. Now, you have to wait until the second last week to do it, but you can get there. That's a place you can get to. So I don't hate it at all. I think the over is fine. I don't. A lot of things could happen. One, you could hit the over, and Sam Pittman can be fired this year. It's a weird sort of. They could overperform expectations, and he could still be fired. I think bringing in Bobby Petrino is a really weird thing to do, especially if you don't want him to replace Sam Pittman next year. But again, we said the same thing last year about Texas A&M, and they didn't do that. So who knows, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like this team is not going to be particularly good. But yeah, could they squeak in a 5th win somewhere? Maybe even a 6th win? Sure, maybe. But they're not going to do it by being a good team. They're going to squeak in a win by upsetting someone.
Yeah, fair. And it would be because of Petrino and Green, I think. We all agree. All right, the Kentucky Wildcats. Hey, congratulations. Your new OC is Bush Hamdan. Enjoy that. Poor Brock Grant Vandegrift. I don't think he knows what he's getting into here playing for Mr. Hamdan. I like they have an experienced offensive line. They, again, are net winners in the portal. They have more Ryan now than they did at the end of last season. They pick up I spelled that wrong. Ja'Cory Macklin, pardon the misspelling, from North Texas, I believe. I like this. There's only 3 teams in all of FBS that are green in all 4 experience and improvement metrics. That is huge. The 6.5, the thing is, I can't get past this and a new quarterback. I can't. I don't know. If Robert Martin was in there calling plays, I'd probably take the over 6.5, but I can't with this guy. I've done too many segments on just Hamden's not the guy. Brendan's like a nicer guy than me and probably a lot more rational. I don't know if you've dug into just how the weird career of Bush Hamdan, but I'm just super bearish on just him, and he's the poop in the ice cream, as Kentucky basketball coach John Calipari would say. When it comes to this program, I can't back him. So I don't know. Tell me I'm a bad guy and this offense is going to be great here.
No, you've probably done way more research on Hamden than myself, but I'm looking at new OC, new quarterback. I'm not really liking that. Like, it's a lot of newness just with those two, arguably two of the most important kind of positions within a football program, offense coordinator, quarterback, both new. So a little bit of question marks there for sure, but O-line I like. Macklin was a big pickup from the portal there at wideout. And I don't think Mark Stoops is an exceptional coach, but I think he's a really good coach. I think he gets his team to perform better than what the collective talent, the sum of the talent, basically. So looking at the schedule, over under 6.5, I think they're going to hover right around there, like similar to what they did last year. I think last year they went like 7-6, if I recall correctly. There's some tough games there, but they do play Georgia, but they do get them at home. At Ole Miss is going to be tough. At Tennessee is going to be tough. At Texas is going to be tough. Louisville's not easy. So, yeah, I think they're going to hover right around bowl eligibility. I don't think this team's going to be anything special. I don't think they're going to contend for an SEC title or anything like that, or a playoff spot. But, yeah, Javon Dumas-Johnson I thought was a big pickup defensively at linebacker. As Georgia transfers. They got some certain pieces that I like. But, yeah, just in totality, I just think this will be an average SEC team.
Yeah, fair. What do you think, Robert, about Kentucky here?
Yeah, this is again another team. I said it about Missouri earlier. You go back to 21, they were 10-3. People, oh, they're a good SEC team now. This is a good SEC team. Underperformed again last year and the year before that, both 7-6 both years. Should have beat Clemson in that bowl, which I'm very sad about because I had Kentucky plus 200 money line, so I'm very sad about that. They lost by 3 somehow, but whatever. That doesn't particularly matter right now. But no, this is another team where it's a team that did really well for a couple of years because they had a really good quarterback in there. Will Levis, I think Will Levis was on the team then, and then they had a worse year the next year, but now he's in the NFL. It's just Brock Vandegrift. He was on Georgia there for a while. He was Stetson Bennett's backup, if I remember correctly, right? I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was on
yeah.
He was highly recruited. You can't beat out Stetson Bennett, and then you can't beat out Carson Beck. Now, Carson Beck actually pretty good. Stetson Bennett threw 4 interceptions in an NFL preseason game just a couple days ago. Again, the fact that you couldn't beat out either of those guys, not the greatest sign, but okay, yeah, you're going to Kentucky, you're getting a new head start. Maybe they think that's the best, and you got a good receiver, that's good. But again, it's a Bush Hamdan offense, right? Defense is pretty good, but again, defense is not winning you the SEC here this year. You need better than that. You need more than just stop them from scoring. You need to actually score points, especially when you've got LSU. You're not actually playing LSU. But the point is, you've got teams that have really high-powered offenses in the SEC. You don't win SEC games 10-3 anymore. You win them 34-30, right? You need offense. And I don't, even though you have a good wide receiver, I'm not seeing it with Brock Vandegrift and Bush Hamdan there.
Yeah, you make a good point, too. I think that if you look at Georgia, Mississippi, even you throw Florida in there as underrated, and Tennessee and Texas, you've got probably the toughest of the toughest offenses covered in there. So that kind of neutralizes what should be the strength of this team. That's a tough draw. Yeah. So we will see. Welcome to the SEC, Mr. Hamdan. I'm sure the people of Lexington will love you. All right, the rest of the SEC, just a little bit on each of these teams. My comments, and then you can add as you like. South Carolina, they couldn't run the ball last season. This is just a horrible GGAB. They're starting over at quarterback. They were a more compelling team under Muschamp to me. Now they're just a whatever. At least Muschamp was so bad and he did just so many dumb things that they were fun to watch at least 2 or 3 times a year. Now they're just whatever. Not really interested in this team. What about you, Brendan? Anything interesting on the Gamecocks?
I'm interested to see what Lenora Sellers does at quarterback. He's a redshirt freshman. I think he's talented, so I'm excited to see what he does. They do have Rocket Sanders, so I think you'll see a slight improvement at the very least in terms of rushing. But yeah, questions about the offensive line. I have questions defensively, so I don't think South Carolina is really going to be a team that plays spoiler this year, even, or they might contend for a bowl game. But I'm not too locked in with South Carolina this year.
All right, Robert, anything on South Carolina?
No, I think losing Rattler is a loss for this team. He was an established quarterback who had been here for many years, figured out the offense. Again, established, going 5-7. Not the greatest look, but that was your ceiling, right? You got to that point, and
Yeah.
now that's gone. So you're starting over again. I think this team has another struggling year. Maybe in the future you could do something, but if you couldn't get there with Spencer Rattler, I don't think you're getting there with a redshirt freshman.
Brutal schedule
Yeah.
as well. Brutal schedule.
All right, Mississippi State. This is hard for any program. I think if you were just Alabama or Ohio State, if you had 3 head coaches in 3 seasons, you'd be, especially with just the different offensive systems, it would be tough. If you're a program like State, it's going to be even tougher. I like adding Shapen. I like I can't say his name, the kid from UTEP who was on our top Ryan list all last season. So there's some pieces there, but man, the cupboard is bare when it comes to offensive line and in defense. And then you lose Zach Arnett as your head coach. So this looks rough to me. There's not a lot of pieces to like. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, this screams rebuilding year to me. Just look at that defense. And again, we're talking about how SEC teams are winning through offense now. Good luck. Now also you lose Will Rogers. That was your best offensive quarterback. Okay, and you replace that a little bit. You had Blake Shapen, who was okay at Baylor, definitely not great, and you replace that with Jeff Lebby on the defensive side of the ball there for Oklahoma. This screams rebuild to a better in a few years. Like in a few years, you could see this becoming. This could be a team that could go get like your 9 or 10 win season in 3 years, but not this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a rebuilding year. I'm not really going to put too much stock into what I see from Mississippi State this year. So, yeah, completely rebuild. Schedule's tough. We'll see what happens, but looking forward more to year 2, year 3 under Levy.
Yeah. Yep, I think we all agree there. All right, last, Vanderbilt. The defense has just not gotten there even close with Clark Lee. It's improved, but it's still just really bad by SEC standards or just FBS standards. I need to see proof of life in the NIL and portal era. This is just one of those programs like probably Temple. Stanford's actually figuring it out though, but in the NIL and portal era, these super academic schools are they're in a tough spot. At least Diego Pavia is a different look for the SEC. It's not like they're trying to out SEC the rest of the SEC, which is just going to be a disaster. There's a little bit of zig to the zag of the SEC, but I don't know. This is just a matter. Vanderbilt can't be hurting for money, so it's not. I don't know. And Lee actually played there, so they're going to show him probably some patience and more than an average coach. But I just don't know if this ever gets better. Am I just too pessimistic, Brendan?
No, Vanderbilt's going to be Vanderbilt again this year. You brought up a good point about Pavia. I'm excited to see what he does this year. But yeah, I'm not. Vanderbilt's going to be bad again. There's really no 2 ways around it. They just don't match up talent-wise with the rest of the SEC.
Yeah. Robert, are you putting all your faith in Jerry Kill as offensive analyst to turn this thing around here?
Yeah, I'm fairly sure he's going to be head coach like relatively soon. I feel like that's why
Really?
you bring him in. Like, why would you? I mean, when Jerry Kill, we've talked about it before, has this insane bouncing around different places, and basically you go to Vanderbilt and they're like, "Hey, be our offensive analyst." Really? And you also bring your quarterback from New Mexico State. You're telling me you left New Mexico State, a job in which you had them legitimately competitive in a conference, went to the conference championship game, and mind you, also had hundreds of thousands of dollars in bonuses because of that, and you traded all of that for being an offensive analyst at the worst school in the SEC? No. You're
Good. Yeah.
Well, no, I think he was promised something. Because again, we're looking at what this is the 4th year under here with the current head coach. Maybe he doesn't make it to 5, and you just say, "Cool, it's Jerry Kill now."
The reason I can't see that being the case is Vanderbilt is an elite. They're one of 19 schools ranked higher than my school academically. They're almost Ivy League, and I don't see anybody that really makes a decision in that kind of school looking at Jerry Kill and saying, "That's my kind of guy." I just say that
Isn't he a sweater vest?
he. I don't think he really appeals to those kind of people, is to put it nicely. I don't think he can stay 10 minutes in a room with basically any decision maker there.
Not enough tweed jackets.
Yeah. I don't think he has a tweed jacket with the little patches on the elbows there. All right. That brings us to the 3 questions about the SEC. Bringing back the Smith Mansion because I'm not liking where I'm landing here. With that, I will go first for my best Heisman bet, and I'm just going to just shamefully just say Quinn Ewers and not going to be happy about it.
Shame.
What?
No, I was kidding.
What? Okay. Brendan?
Yeah, I'm going with Carson Beck, and I honestly think it's his Heisman Trophy to lose because I think Georgia's going to have some of the most. It's partly because of the schedule, because they're going to be in the national spotlight a ton based on that schedule, based on how many marquee games they have. So if he performs very well and up to expectation, I think it's his trophy to lose, to be honest.
That's a good point. I like that. Did he convince you, Robert?
With Quinn Ewers, I said shame because I think that's a chalky-ish pick. I mean, he is like the third favorite, so it's not the most chalky, but I think the best bet is Nico Alamiavea. I think now he's actually the 6th favorite. I got him though a lot better. I think I got him somewhere at 20-1 or 30 because for a while he was off the board. I don't know if people thought he was like not going to be the starter after destroying Iowa. I don't know why people wouldn't think that, but apparently he wasn't. So I got him at an insane number. But no, I think with this, I get that people and Jalen Milrose there at 12-1, and I get the Carson Beck thing. I feel like at a certain point there's so much expectation priced in, and we learned this last year with Oregon, where it was like, cool, Oregon dominated basically every game. They had 2 losses to Washington. They lost. They lost the game, and Bo Nix was the favorite for the Heisman, didn't win the Heisman, right? Who won the Heisman? Jaden Daniels, LSU, not the best season overall for the team, but just insane numbers, right? And I feel like this is the argument against Carson Beck. Okay, yeah, he could put up crazy stats. Now, to be fair, I think when Georgia gets up later in games, they're going to run the ball more. Okay, maybe he's going to have decent stat lines, maybe 250, 2 touchdowns or whatever. He's going to have decent stat lines. But I think what we're seeing now is that instead of that, I would much rather have the guy who's going to put up insane stats, right? And it's basically the discrimination of basically misplaced expectations, right? People aren't expecting Tennessee to be good. So if Tennessee is a 10-2, 11-1 team, he's going to win the Heisman. Even if Carson Beck and Georgia are 12-0, if they drop one game, if they're both 11-1 heading into the SEC championship game, if they win it, that's it then. That's the ball game, right? That's the level of how this expectation works. And again, it is dumb. It's stupid. It makes no sense. But we live by the rules of this. If we're betting on this market, we have to abide by the insane rules that they have created in this market. Sure, yeah. That's my argument for it. This makes no sense, so whatever. Just do the thing that doesn't make sense. It's fine.
No, you had arguments so much superior to mine, which is why I'm stuck literally like with the house. It looks like it had literally the house with no blueprints, and my picks look like that too. Okay, I like my pick in this one better though. One upset. It doesn't have to be a conference game, but one SEC upset. Brendan, you go first on this one.
Yeah, honestly, this was difficult for me, but I said Auburn was going to play spoiler somewhere, and I think it's going to be Georgia. I don't know. I just have a funny feeling about it. So I think I'll go Auburn over Georgia. I'm not like super confident in it, but I just think Hugh Freeze has that magic where once a year he's going to pull an upset. And Georgia does have a tendency to have some down games. Like we saw them be competitive with Missouri 2 years ago. Auburn game last year was close as well. So they're not out here dominating opponents year after year every single week. So yeah, I think Georgia's going to trip up this year to a team they shouldn't. And my guess is it's going to be Auburn.
I believe in poker they might call this going over the top of you. I'm actually going with Arkansas over Auburn. That advantage they have at quarterback and OC against Auburn. But I like your logic there too. So we've got Auburn on both sides. So Robert, by the transitive property, you're going to have Arkansas over Georgia then, right?
No, I will not go there. However, I am going to an old favorite here. Oklahoma over Texas.
Wow, I can't. Yeah, just in the realm of anything can happen in a rivalry game alone. Yeah,
I think it's actually a pretty big dog right now. Actually, I think they're like 10 or not. I think it was 9.
Yeah,
8.5.
8.5 now. I saw 9 before, but yeah, it's a rivalry game. Both of them are coming off of bye games. That's Texas's sixth game of the season. That's about time for them to have a really dumb loss. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Okay. And then your turn to go first on this one, Robert. Who plays for the conference title game?
Give me Georgia, Tennessee.
Ooh, I like it. I will go with, and again, this is one of my Smith Mansion picks here. I'm going to go with Texas, and I'm going to go with Texas and Georgia. I don't like anything here. And the guy who nailed this one last year, Brendan, to wrap up the podcast, you are going with?
Hopefully, here's to nailing it the second year in a row. I'm going to go Texas and Ole Miss. I think they just have the most favorable schedules of the contending teams. So I don't think they might not be the best two teams, but the favorable schedules I think will work out nicely for them.
I don't know what to say. You know what our guest just did? He just predicted that two horrible recent USC coaches are going to face off for the SEC title game. That was mean, sir. But I still appreciate it. It's a solid opinion.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Brendan.
You're gonna have to watch it with your eyelid with tape. Your eyelids taped to your forehead.
I'm spending that game with the dogs here. I'm just going to play with them all 3 hours. I can't. I just can't. We can't tolerate that. Robert, you were going to say.
Yeah. Brendan here is going to get us on a bulletin board in Athens here. It's going to be like, oh, people thought that it was going to be Texas versus Ole Miss.
There you go.
They doubted us all season. 7 wins.
If they put me on a bulletin board, I'm all for it. If I'm motivation for some teams, I don't care. Do it.
There you go. Yeah. We should check Stuart Mandel's opinion for this one. Maybe he has Georgia going 6-6. And with that, Brendan, thank you so much. Very generous with your time. Appreciate it. As always, very well thought of and very well spoken, and very smooth delivery too. Something I have to work on. But thank you again for your time.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Robert, our next time will be looking ahead to week 1.
Well, no, Mountain West, then week 1.
Oh yeah, sorry, the Mountain West. Yeah,
the last conference
with the Duck. Yes. So until then, thank you everyone for watching, and we will talk to you soon.